OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, it's Monday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. It's Eoin with you all the way through until 10 this morning. We don't know where to start because there's too much. There is literally too much going on at the moment. And we'll see how well that serves everybody at the end of the year. But in the meantime, hashtag OTB AM. You can leave a comment in the YouTube stream. The performance rankings are imminent. We're going to talk rugby with Alan Quinlan. We're going to talk Gaelic football with Kevin Walsh. That was a good booking to book Kevin Walsh to talk to us about the big Connacht showdown. That's coming a little bit later on in the show. And plenty more besides. So the Ireland women's rugby team were hammered. The results across Leinster were pretty interesting. Across Ulster were pretty interesting. The Connacht result was a little bit surprising in some aspects and then not at all surprising in others. We're going to get into that. The hurling was class, also terrible at various stages. So yeah, pays you money, you take your choice. And then the biggest fight of the year happened, somewhat overshadowed, it's fair to say, by events outside the ring, but then not overshadowed at all, according to most of the fight reports that you're reading and the post-fight reports, and the fact that they're now talking about Tyson Fury's future and perhaps a unification fight against the winner of Usyk Joshua, at which point it seems nobody will care about any of his connections in the past to Daniel Kinahan. So, as I say, you pay your money, you take your choice. Owen, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Ger. How are you getting on?
I'm worried. I'm very worried. I'm very worried by Louth lying in wait in the not so long grass for Kildare, and I would suspect that a lot of Kildare supporters are having PTSD about the various occasions in the past when the wee county scored like unbelievable goals, or somebody went on a 9-point scoring binge to beat Kildare when Kildare were the big dogs, you know, cocky heading into a championship, and then end up going, oh, Louth just knocked us out.
You really worried? So, like,
legit.
You're thinking that sort of like Carlow in Tullamore-esque sort of ambush coming this weekend. It's this weekend, isn't it?
Before your time, when Miko was in charge for the first time and we'd had a great league campaign in Division 1 and everything had gone great, Louth, first round of the championship, television cameras there for the first round of the last championship, which would never have happened. Stephen White scored an outrageous goal to knock Kildare out, and that was the end of the season, but it was pre-backdoor, so that's how long ago it was. And there's a ghost there. There are ghosts.
I mean, these things shouldn't be real, but they sometimes are real. Like, it felt that there were Armagh ghosts on show yesterday in Ballybuffet, it felt.
Well, Geezer in the first round of the championship, not so good. Geezer do the back door, absolute genius. So, we'll see.
But the back door is going to be
very
fantastic,
short,
even though it's only going to be 2 rounds. Like, you're looking at the teams who've been dumped in there now at the moment, and you still kind of want them to avoid one another. Like, you want Mayo to make it to an All-Ireland quarter-final, for example. You want them there on that weekend, because if it's going to be Dublin, Tyrone, Galway, Kerry, for example, Mayo in either of those matchups against any of those 4 teams is a game that you're absolutely not turning off. But the same goes for all these teams that are going to come through. It seems like Armagh against those teams is something you'd watch as well. And we're going to get into it in the performance rankings. It's a lot of form lines have been taken to with a pickaxe and are in tatters. And maybe people who like rank GAA teams and try and find that little modes are also in disarray over the.
Are you?
I'm always in a state of disarray, just more so this morning.
It's like a general life position, but in terms of the rankings, which had obviously always been correct and infallible like the Pope.
Oh, sorry. Yes, that is a very good point. You did remind me that they are bulletproof. So once they reconvene, once the College of Cardinals comes together to reconvene on what actually has happened to those rankings, I'm sure they'll conclude that actually everything is fine.
Yeah, okay. So we need a bit of white smoke, and we'll get that across the week. Right, in the meantime, look, let's just get into the performance rankings today, because there is so much to squeeze and shoehorn in. It's 7:34 this morning. This is OTB AM. We're live every morning with Gillette Labs. In the meantime, here are the performance rankings.
That wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
Okay, so as you said, that there's a load of different things to get into. That point that I just made there a moment ago, the GAA League being in tatters, is something we're going to kick off with. We're going to go through Everton, Manchester United, some of the hurling storylines, Galway and what happened in that game against Mayo yesterday, and hopefully get all that in over the next little while. But just on that GAA League form, I think it's a common theme that we saw over the course of the weekend, that some of the storylines that we thought might have prevailed throughout the summer have already been left in ruins, really. Now, I don't think that anybody thought that the hurling storylines from the league were going to maintain in summer, for example, Limerick.
Well, but Wexford, I did think Wexford were going to use the league as a springboard to catapult themselves into maybe contention. I thought that they were on the coattails of Waterford across the league, and then Dublin did them. Now, Wexford will rue missed chances, missed frees, missed penalty, second week in a row, missed penalty, and but they could be out. That could be it for them, and they should be out. If Galway just hadn't bottled the last 5 minutes against them, then Wexford will be gone from the championship. So they're hanging on by fingernails at the moment.
Yeah, the thing is, Dublin didn't have a bad league themselves at all. They finished above Tipperary in the league, although maybe on the evidence yesterday that's not actually something to write home about. But Wexford were definitely better, it felt, than Dublin.
Definitely.
In the league, so
Dublin collapsed in the league, and you can kind of pinpoint the game against Kilkenny where they were going into that game going, we're full of confidence, this is something, we're real, and then collapse. But they bounced back, and they played good hurling, and they outthought Wexford in that game.
Form is just bizarre, really, isn't it, when you think about it? We know that we can't ever compare results from Team A against Team B and then Team B against Team C and hope that A and C matches up on that. But even by that, knowing that, nothing like that even makes sense. You talk about the Dublin hurling team, and you would have looked at maybe the game against Laois in week 1, and you might have pointed to even that, not even the league. You might have pointed to week 1.
They nearly lost.
Listen, this could actually be a real problem for them if that's where they're at. Or maybe Laois are just really good. And then Kilkenny absolutely tear Laois limb from limb at the weekend. So nothing makes sense. We know absolutely nothing. And we maybe should never, ever get into the prediction game or trying to put any sense on what happens, because the championship is random and wonderful. And that weekend was just crazy. And that's just the hurling. The football form lines have also been left in tatters, which is a little bit more surprising, because the Football League matters more than the hurling league right now, and that's the truth. I think, to be fair, a lot of people had said that the back-to-back games against Roscommon, from a Galway perspective, you can't read a whole pile into them. I wasn't sure, I don't know, but people had made the point that maybe the first of those 2 games was a bit of a phony war because Galway had already got promoted, and secondly, they were 2 weeks out from the Mayo game, so why would they bother showing their hand against Roscommon in Croke Park? Now, I'm not sure if that's actually the truth, but they definitely did have a different game plan yesterday. There was definitely a better defensive game plan. I think they had an extra man back against Roscommon in that league final, but it was pretty ineffective. Yesterday, that defence was far more packed. It was a perfect antidote to Hornball. And at the same time then, they only win the game by a point. So again, I think we just need to accept, when it comes to this Galway Mayo fixture yesterday, there were a ton of different ways that you can actually look at it. When you look at the transfer players that Mayo have to come back into the team, when you look at the fact that Galway, in slow motion, almost ended up losing grip on that win yesterday.
Yeah.
It would have been less extraordinary had Mayo scored 2 goals and drawn the game. It was 5 points just rattled off, and Keegan goes over the bar at the outside of the boot. You're okay, nice. Mayo are turning it on now, and it doesn't actually matter. And were it not for maybe poor shot selection from Aidan Orme right at the end, if they'd passed the ball around in the loop one more time and found a shooter, it's a draw. And to pick off 6 consecutive scores in a row would have completely changed how we're talking about this Galway team this morning. But it sometimes takes a really ugly conclusion to grind out a big result at the very start for a manager's reign to get going. And it feels like Pádraig Joyce has been one of those managers who's been mostly affected by COVID, just because of the height that Galway were at in early 2020. So you've got to look at that, and you've got to look at the management team that he's got around him, and some of the players that are clearly on the upward trajectory. And that includes someone who's 32 in Paul Conroy at the moment, who's playing the best football of his life. And you're saying, okay, I think the fact that they won is more important than the fact that they almost lost, if that makes any sense.
It does. I mean, I see the benefits of the argument, and here's the thing. It's Leitrim in the next round. We'd expect them to win that, and then it'll be Roscommon in the final. So an opportunity for them to win the important game against Roscommon this year, and to bounce straight into an All-Ireland quarter-final with the confidence of a title behind them. At the same time, are you making them overwhelming favourites? Are you making them 5-point favourites against Roscommon?
No.
You're not.
No.
Would you be terribly surprised if Roscommon beat them on the day?
Absolutely not.
No. So I think if they'd seen the game out, if they'd won by 5 points, you'd be like, yeah, that was a great performance. That's like a signature win for them. It's just that there was also a signature near collapse.
Yeah. Yeah, and there is time, and I think the fact that they have another game before what should be Roscommon, and what should be a win in that game before Roscommon, is something that's really going to benefit them. Like, if we kind of like keep on the theme of league form, like, I know Mayo were hockeyed in the league final, but they got to the league final. They were on the table the second best team in Division 1 this year, and I think if you looked at the league final, you would have said, okay, well, they just didn't care about that game. They're keeping things up their sleeve, and they're going to show them against Galway. And we didn't see that at all. And I think the Mayo level of performance is actually quite surprising, even allowing for the fact that they were missing a lot of really important players. I think Rob Henley is a big loss to this team at the moment. I think Paddy Durkin is a big loss to this team. I think Cillian O'Connor needs time, but he's going to get time. It is 6 weeks until Mayo play again. Like it's 3 times the gap that they had between the Kerry and Galway game, the gap that they now have before their next game. Yes, it's going to be a very good team that they play. There's a good chance it'll be a very good team that they play, but like there's a long, long time for them to get things back together, and I would not be surprised if they got further than Galway in this championship.
6 weeks is like a taper down, go on holidays, do a full pre-season, taper back up, and then you go again. It's an insane amount of time. It's almost like this championship structure hasn't been thought through properly.
Yeah, possibly.
And here's the other thing: no one's going to show up to these games. No one's going to. We should definitely not factor in any financial benefit of having 27,000 at games. You cannot do that. You can't. People don't want to watch championship matches in April. They definitely don't. It's too cold outside.
Yeah, like
Proposal B is useless.
Well, I mean, like the league did take a battering this weekend. I mean, that's what the counterpoint to that would be.
Yes, because the championship is the only thing that matters. And if everybody was playing the championship, everybody would show up in big numbers because we want to see good games between teams. And look at all the minnows, the games between the minnows. They were all great. There was something in all of them to make you show up. The game in Ockram sounds like it was an absolute roller coaster.
A goal fest. The other league form line that we were interested in was Armagh. I think that maybe we kind of spoke about this at the end of the league, that the form wasn't as hot as it was at the start.
Well, that's it, isn't it? That actually does this not blow up your argument here in that Armagh's league form has actually come straight through, and also Donegal's Ballybuffet form has come through, where it's a complete fortress. No thanks. No one's ever going to win there again. And if they could play every game there, they'd be All-Ireland champions. It's the equivalent of Dublin and Croke Park.
Well, what are Donegal very flaky or very unflaky? Like, how do you look at this whole decade that they've had since last winning All-Ireland and put a word on it? If you have to go, you're a tabloid headline writer and you've got one word, are you going flaky or unflaky? Is unflaky a word?
No.
I don't know.
Unbreakable would be the opposite of flaky, would it be? But that's not really. They're not that either.
Like, they beat Armagh by 1 point on the final day of the league when they had that brawl. Like, that was the form line, and like they'd lost to Dublin in Croke Park the week before that. Obviously, Armagh had beaten Dublin in Croke Park earlier in the league. I do think that this does break the form a little bit, but I also do accept that there were signs that Armagh were, as I say, not as hot as they were earlier in the league. But Donegal also and Ballybuffet, as you say, are just this incredible beast. But also in the Ulster Championship, full stop, that the problem for Donegal has been getting to the semi-final when it really matters. And yes, that has, over the last 2 seasons in particular, tripped its way into the Ulster Championship because there was no back door. There's a bit of a Mayo about them, and I mean that in the best way possible, where they will get to a certain level and they will put up impressive performances throughout the season before falling at a hurdle that's been a problem for them over the last little while, and not getting to a semi-final since beating Dublin in 2014 is constantly going to be the thing that I guess really irks Donegal people, because they feel that team was definitely good enough and has been good enough to get to a semi-final. I mean, that's not what you should be talking about.
I mean, I think they should have beaten Kerry in the All-Ireland final.
Yesterday.
I do think they should have beaten Kerry in that All-Ireland final, and we'd be talking completely differently about that Kerry team if the ball hadn't been kicked out to Donaghy and Donaghy hadn't kicked it into the back of the net. But I think that what you can say about them, it's not a very snappy headline, is that they have a paper thin squad, and that paper thin squad breaks down again and again and again when one player or 2 players get injured. It's been McBrearty or Murphy getting injured at one stage of the season or other, and they appear to be fit at the moment, and as a result they're like taking care of business against a Division 1 team. Like, it was a routine victory for them.
Yeah, and it could have been more. Like, I know Armagh had that flurry at the start of the second half where they could have picked off a couple of goals, but Donegal should have gone into the break with a bigger lead.
And if they were in Munster, or if they were in Leinster, they'd now be looking forward, or if they were in Connacht, they'd be looking forward to a bit of cannon fodder and then one more game, and then you're in an All-Ireland quarter-final. But as it is, it's like, Okay, another slog, and there'll be brawls, and there'll be suspensions, and there'll be injuries along the way. So, I think that's what explains it.
Is there anything in that game yesterday that suggests that Armagh had their eye off the ball as a result of the suspensions? Because this was an argument put forward by Mark O'Shea in the Mail on Sunday yesterday, that when he got off a suspension back in the day for a Munster semi-final, or maybe a Munster final against Cork, just played really poorly. He said that when Lee Keegan got off suspension a few years ago for Mayo in a big championship match, he played poorly. He made the point that Diarmuid Connolly, after a famous late night suspension let off, nobody actually remembers how the Connolly played in that game.
Not great.
Not great. So he actually called this yesterday, that Armagh were going to be affected in a negative way by the suspensions, and that's been an argument that's been put out. I'm not sure if I fully subscribe to it, but I think maybe on Donegal's, I think it actually tells us something about Donegal, that they were like, it was kind of like Liam Cahill-esque, but they're like, we're not going to appeal these, and we're going to focus on ourselves and actually control what we can control. As it turns out, you can control the disciplinary process as well, to be honest, but maybe that just indicated a bit more about Donegal's mentality going into the game. I don't know, like, it feels like not a watertight argument, but it's something, it exists.
And fair play to him for making it in advance, because certainly afterwards you can go, well, I mean, there's something to it. I don't know, I think, like, is there something to the fact that maybe Armagh need to re-establish themselves as a Division 1 team over many years, so that when stuff like this happens, or when they go through the back door, they're ready for whatever comes next? Like, I don't think Armagh are done just yet. I certainly, Armagh Mayo will be a good ding-dong battle at a neutral venue. Are the qualifiers going to be neutral? I don't know, are they?
I presume so, but again, you can't assume anything. It's usually, I don't know, like I hope so, and like that would be an absolutely brilliant clash between those two. So what you're looking at is whoever comes through now over the next couple of weeks to try and beef up those qualifiers, but it's going to be Mayo against one of those Ulster teams is the fixture you want to see.
Who are the easy teams left who are going to be in the qualifiers? Like, who are the easiest teams? Who is everybody looking at going, yeah, I'll take you?
Cork, really, isn't it?
Meath?
Meath stayed up. It was Offaly and Down who went down from Division 2, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So Louth, potentially after getting their promotion from the Division 3.
Well, now they're going to be in the Leinster final.
Yeah, as it turns out. There is...
Now they're 4-1 and 5-point underdogs against Kildare, by the way, which are, I think... that's an incorrect assessment of how that game's going to go.
Like, never can you ever point a finger at somebody and accuse them of yarrying away their county's chances. You were sitting here, 5 days in advance on a Monday morning after the busiest weekend in sport, and you're pushing this narrative that Kildare are going to get beaten by that.
No, I think it's a 50. I think it's much closer to a 50-50 game than a 4-1 outsider in a 2-horse races. Like, that's incorrect. It's a 2-point game, and it'll be in the melting pot right until the end.
We'll see.
They just scored 5-10.
Yeah, and they have
15-point victory in a.
Like, I mean, they have a couple of like outstanding forwards, and like I know Sam Mulroy's got a lot of the credit this year, but Kieran Byrne is obviously excellent as well. But Kildare will be like, I see her two. I see her a couple of excellent forwards, and I'll raise you 3. And they've got an inside forward line that is just primed to do damage in the Leinster Championship, outside of maybe a game against Dublin at the moment. And Kildare should be licking their chops at the prospect of having a few games in the Leinster Championship after slogging it out in Division 1 all spring. Like, this is where those 3 inside forwards really should come into their own. So that defeatist attitude, I don't think, is going to wash in that camp this week.
An impressive win for Cavan. Coy Bib, says Shane. Shifty Lad says, lads, I hope you moved Wicklow up a page in the power rankings. Amazing game and result. I hope you realise how much a win means for a small team. Congratulations to Garden. James says, 2 weeks ago I ripped into Eoin for not putting Munster in the red after their loss to Exeter. I have to eat humble pie and admit they should be in the green given their response with 2 huge wins. The season is back up and running. Johan van Grand no more. Johan van Great. Step forward.
Wow. This is a real Gilroy special this morning, isn't it? I mean, loving Munster, hating Kildare. This is just a complete about turn on all your beliefs.
No, I love Munster. That's the whole point about this.
Yeah, you just want them to succeed. Their downturn makes you sad, basically.
Well, yeah, all great teams need a rival. What's next?
Everton are next. Speaking of all great teams needing a rival, I don't think Liverpool wants any sort of rival in Liverpool at the moment. They're talking about a quintuple this year by winning all 4 trophies and relegating Everton. That's the thing that they want. And yesterday was like, I mean, we'll get to Manchester United Arsenal, which was, for me, the chaos of that and the crapness of it really made it the game at the weekend. But there was also kind of a good level of hilarity around Everton against Liverpool yesterday. Not least Anthony Gordon going on Twitter after the game to say that he was fouled and that penalty that wasn't given in the second half should have been given. I think it was like a couple of the hands up emojis on Twitter yesterday. Frank Lampard giving out about it afterwards, saying if that was a Liverpool decision, if that was Mo Salah, it would have been a penalty. And then obviously Liverpool's Twitter comes out with the statistics that Mo Salah doesn't get fouled very often at all. So on social media, this is kind of taken on a life of its own. Everton versus Liverpool, the flashpoint before half-time, where Mane puts a hand in the face, the Richarlison is down lying on the ground, Doucouré takes the legs from under a Liverpool player to just try and stop this game. There was enough needle in this, and obviously the cherry on the cake was Pickford lying on the ball late in the first half, and Alisson with Liverpool's cushion in the second half. The ball rolls to him and he lies prone on the floor. Like somebody's trying to hide on Call of Duty at the end, taking the piss out of Jordan Pickford. Just a lovely moment and a lovely collection of moments of memes really throughout this Liverpool-Everton game. And Liverpool were always going to win this fixture. And because of what Burnley did earlier in the game, Everton started that fixture in the relegation zone, and that's obviously where they end. So I thought they were safe a couple of weeks ago after they beat Manchester United. But I too am eating humble pie because Everton, you can never count on them to not let you down.
If Everton go down, they're going to be the new Leeds. It could be a generation before they get back. Like, I understand things are different now from when Leeds went down, and that the parachute payments make it very likely you're going to be able to keep most of your team together, and most clubs have been able to use that to at least yo-yo back in. But I'm just not sure that Everton are most clubs. It feels like whatever you can say about the Manchester United dressing room, you could say times 100 about the Everton dressing room over the last couple of years, with a few obvious honourable exceptions. And is Frank Lampard the man you want to yo-yo you back up? I'm not sure. I don't know. Like, Burnley's recovery has been remarkable, absolutely remarkable. And now they turn from being the hunter to the hunted, and let's see if they can maintain what they're doing. But Everton's fixture list, it's not great. Like, the one thing that Everton have is that Leeds are also sinking like a stone, and that they might be able to catch them. So Everton's fixture list are Chelsea next Sunday, Leicester the following Sunday, Watford midweek, Brentford, who are obviously doing quite well at the moment, and then their final two games are Palace, and the final game of the season is at Arsenal, who will definitely have something to play for, or who may actually already be fourth. Is there a possibility they've got it wrapped up by the last game of the season? Yeah.
There's a possibility, obviously, if this Spurs collapse is to be believed, but this is Arsenal we're talking about, and I'm not necessarily sure. Like, I think if we're like on the theme of eating humble pie, like 2 weeks ago I said Arsenal, given their current form, would be lucky if that Tottenham fixture actually mattered for them, that Tottenham will be out of sight at this point, and Arsenal have Chelsea and Manchester United coming down the tracks, and Spurs are going to keep winning. Arsenal are going to lose to Chelsea, and they'd be doing well to beat Manchester United. As it turned out, Spurs lose to Brighton, Arsenal beat those two teams, and things have turned quickly. So yeah, the chances are Arsenal will still have something to play for, I think, on that final day. But the main thing about that fixture is that it's at the Emirates, and Everton on the road have been chronic over the last little while. That's been their big issue. Like tonight, like you're right, Leeds United are definitely not in the clear whatsoever. They're playing Crystal Palace tonight.
But if they were to win tonight, that you would feel that that's enough of a buffer. But if they lose that, Leeds then play Manchester City, Arsenal, Chelsea in their next three games after that, which is, I mean, I'm not saying it's 0 points guaranteed, but it could well be 0 points. So then all of a sudden they've got two games after say their season, which is Brighton at home and Brentford away. Again, they could easily, with a gun to their heads, win those two games. So the fixture list over the last while is pretty interesting. Burnley play Villa twice. Villa also not entirely safe if everybody was to go on a crazy run here.
Not that you'd be concerned in the immediate term about that, but it's surprising to see them only 4 points clear of Leeds United, because it doesn't feel like Leeds United are only 4 points behind Aston Villa, given the talk around both of those clubs this year.
Well, there was an initial, Stevie G's a really good manager, and now it's like, well, it'd be remarkable if you were to be gifted the ability to be both a generational talent as a footballer and then also one of the best managers in world football, which is essentially what we're talking about. Anybody who makes it to the Premier League has one of the best 40 or 50 jobs in world football because you're getting paid millions to manage a football team. And so you should be one of the very best because there aren't that many people who are getting paid millions to manage a football team. And so you should definitely be one of the top 50 people in the world at that job. And it would be remarkable that you would be like one of the top 10 footballers and also one of the top 50 managers. And maybe CVG is not that.
Like, they've lost more games this season than Leeds and Burnley have lost. It's just that middle column, which is really low. Only Arsenal have drawn fewer games than them in the Premier League this season, Villa. So that's been kind of their theme. That maybe in that side of the season, just finding a way to not lose games is something that makes them, at Brighton, and that's the difference between those teams. So I wouldn't be overly concerned. Like, there's no immediate concern, I don't think. Like, as I say, if you're looking at Brentford, for example, who've really gone on the uptick over the last little while, there's only 3 points between them. Southampton are only 3 points ahead of Villa, and Villa have games in hand, I think. So I think that the table is lying a little bit about Aston Villa's current state. And
are they? Like, what if would you back them to beat Burnley twice? I don't know. Like, Burnley's fixture list is Watford, Villa, Spurs, Villa, and Newcastle on the last day of the season, who will be completely safe, and like, we're never going to see each other again. Most of the team are going to be looking at each other. So I'm feeling pretty good if I'm Burnley at the moment. Yeah, and especially you're looking over at what's happening at Everton. That's the main reason of hope for Burnley. But like, it would be quite the win, because who are you backing to get yourself out of a relegation dogfight? You probably would have been backing Dyche against Lampard, especially after the win against Everton. And for things to have taken a turn so quickly, as in Burnley to sack him so quickly after that win, and for it to have worked out.
But it seems that way.
Like, they're very lucky owners if they manage to get out of this. Very lucky owners.
Rather than brave. But yeah, no, good old Michael Jackson doing the job.
Villa's fixture list, it has Norwich next. So all they got to do is beat Norwich and they'll be on 40 points and they'll be grand. But if they don't do that, then it's Burnley, Liverpool, Palace, Burnley and City. So, it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that they get sucked back into it. So the game against Norwich, against Dean Smith, wouldn't that be amazing for Dean Smith to come back and go, screw you, screw you, screw you, screw you. That would be pretty remarkable. But not beyond the bounds of possibility in this crazy topsy-turvy Premier League season that we've had so far.
No, it's going to be a good few weeks for sure.
Everton are going to be the new Leeds. Mark my words. If they go down, there are too many players on too big wages in that changing room who won't take a pay cut. And will the owners, will the new stadium go ahead, or does this blow the whole thing up? I have a strong sense that Everton are completely screwed for a generation if they go down. Wayne Rooney's going to get the Everton job if they go down, says Peter. Wayne Rooney is too smart to take the Everton job if they go down, Peter. He wants the Man United job, and I think there's more chance of being the next Man United manager than there is of being the next Everton manager.
Could be waiting a while.
GA pundits and the power rankings should be in the red after the weekend, says Edward.
GA pundits for sure, not the power rankings.
I think the Football Pod did a pretty good job of predicting most of the scores, with the exception of Paddy back in Armagh, right? I think the other two, certainly they had Donegal and didn't I don't know who have. Did they pick Wexford on home advantage? Didn't he?
I don't remember.
I think he did. Ger talking about how great Kildare were all spring. Now he's trying to tell us Louth have a chance. Hashtag Gera.
Hey, yes,
says Porrick.
Keep that coming, Porrick.
No, look, I'm just saying we had a great spring. We are
Jared.
reborn we have an identity, but there's a banana skin here. There's nothing wrong with that. Louth are a banana skin for Kildare. We're not so arrogant like our friends here that we're like, oh well, we'll just get preparing for an All-Ireland quarter final because that's what happens. Like, we're not like that.
This is the Jack O'Connor legacy. If you're looking for a legacy in Kildare, we're hearing it right here, right now.
Yeah, I mean, if Jack was still there, we'd be like, all defence, 16 men behind the ball against Louth. How are you going to stop Mulroy? Jesus, we can't, so let's not try.
Bit of pent-up frustration there, I'm sensing.
What's next?
The last years. What's next is Manchester United. Like, if we were putting a game in the green, it would have been Arsenal versus Manchester United in the early kick-off on Saturday.
How are Manchester United in the amber here?
Let me explain this first of all.
They used to be in red, right?
As an institution, obviously, they're in the red. But, there are people who follow Manchester United closely who are not Manchester United supporters. And for those people, this is green, green, green. This is the greenest thing the Performance Rankings has ever produced. And like I was kind of making the point earlier on that if this was an Amazon documentary, Amazon would have struck gold. But actually, I'm reconsidering that. We actually don't need behind-the-scenes cameras to give us a full naked, blunt view of the chaos that is ensuing at Manchester United. I think Manchester United have been on these performance rankings every single Monday for the last 2 months. And yes, at times I got bored of Manchester United, but I'm actually getting more and more excited about Manchester United with every passing week, with every new way that they manage to find hilarious ways of creating headlines. Like Saturday was a vintage day, and even if you take away the fact that it was one of the most chaotic games of football we've seen in recent weeks, like, I mean, two full-backs going up against two full-backs and all four of them just being quite bad at football was beautiful. Granit Xhaka's resurgence was great. Bruno Fernandes missing a penalty, sending Ramsdale the wrong way, but Ramsdale still celebrating for some reason. These were all great moments, but it was in the aftermath that things just reached a whole new level. And clearly the best part about it all was Paul Scholes on punditry for DAZN, who says, I know Jesse Lingard won't mind me saying this, but he's told me that the dressing room is a disaster. And I would probably
I had a quick chat with Jesse there. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying the dressing room is just a disaster.
I think Jesse Lingard probably would mind you saying that.
I was reading that from the back page of the Telegraph today. Daniel Zakiri, who I haven't read before, but he's like, "Are we sure he won't mind Paul? Are we sure? Is that okay? Are you sure?" I mean, he might have cost Jesse Lingard a bit of money there. If you're Newcastle or West Ham and you're like, oh, so he speaks to pundits, knowing that they're pundits, and then the pundits feel enabled to go and tell everybody on telly what's going on. I'm not sure I want that in my team. I don't think I want that for my ball club.
Like, Scholes just chose to kind of explode this thing on Saturday, because he too is also enjoying the soap opera that is around his club this season. Clearly, he too believes that this is very much a good story and a fun story that everybody's kind of enjoying at the moment, because look, things would probably be better for Manchester United this season. Maybe we need to kind of enjoy this madness for a little bit longer. Like, it's Scott McTominay coming out after the game as well on Saturday. A whole lot of problems in terms of players, staff, everything higher up was his appraisal of the whole thing. Rangnick was obviously asked on BT Sport about the Jesse Lingard related comments, and he says you'll have to ask Jesse Lingard if you have this information. He says I think the whole group got on reasonably well, but like earlier in the week, Rangnick was describing this thing as open heart surgery as opposed to something cosmetic. Like, some of the sound bites we're getting on a week-to-week on a day-to-day basis are excellent. Like, they are just brilliant content at the moment, Manchester United, and it is ironic that the whole, well, not the whole reason, but one of the reasons why they've got themselves into this mess is because they did chase players who would, I guess, be content for the club. Like, Paul Pogba was a great player if you were a content machine as a football club, and all of a sudden they're accidentally giving the whole football media beast content that is just beyond everybody's wildest dreams week after week.
So then they should be in the green, really.
I would edge them up there personally. I'm not a Manchester United fan, so I would do it, but I would suggest
the Manchester United soap opera is in the green.
Yeah, it's glorious. It's epic.
I haven't read this Daniel Zakiri before, but this is excellent stuff. He's talking about the rivalry between BT and Sky Sports and the difference between them. And he says Sky are front runners because they've got Keane, and Keane obviously has been, he's reached that 8th stage of grief, as we've spoken about on the show here before. But he also says it's important to have a bit of balance here. The antagonist from a rival club is an important part of the cast, with Graham Souness, Carragher and world's most earnest man Martin Keown playing the role this week. Their job is to probe, prod and sometimes laugh at United's expense, which they're more than happy to do, though curiously Souness seems to be the one man in the world with a good word to say about the Glazers. We shouldn't overlook the host, with Dave Jones' understated style on Sky preferable to the unctuous leading questions of Jake Humphrey. Jones knows his guests well enough to be aware of the buttons to press without veering into smarm or thigh slapping, while Humphrey oscillates between flattering and baiting them. Nobody at United is likely to be invited on his high-performance podcast anytime soon. Proof alone that a slide into mediocrity can have its upsides. You were at Alan Partridge last night, weren't you?
I was.
Yeah, it was really good. I was Saturday night. It was excellent, I thought.
Oh, yeah. Genius.
The whole Martin Brennan section, was that just for us in Ireland, or is that for everybody?
Literally just about to say it. I get the sense it was for everybody.
Yeah.
Because A, it was too good to use it on 2 nights.
It was too good.
Yeah, and B, also it didn't feel Like there was very many in-jokes. If anything, I felt like the whole thing was like a good knowledge of English geography would have served you better than a knowledge of Ireland, for example.
Wigan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So no, I think he's going to use that. His Irish accent is absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, it's as you would expect.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I just thought that I don't know why the segue from Jake Humphries to Alan Partridge felt normal there, but it did. 5 minutes past 8 this morning. Amazon would have been laughing their bollocks off if they were covering Man United instead of Arsenal this season, says Yassim. And Devo says, as an Arsenal fan, I thought United were unlucky not to get 2 more penalties on Saturday. Arsenal's defence would give you a heart attack. And that's the thing. That's the thing. It's like one of the match reports was a Barney Roney or somebody was like, curiously, there was stuff for Man United to cling on to in this game.
Yeah.
Like there was actually clear signs of improvement, that something, and then just misfortune, because that football is like ultimately a bunch of random things happening. So anyway, right. Roscommon will beat Galway and Cavan will beat Donegal, says Connor. Well, that would blow the championship wide open, wouldn't it?
Yeah, like I mean, both of those teams have pretty happy memories in the not too distant past of beating those teams. Yeah, what a backdoor that would be if Galway and Donegal win. Obviously, Roscommon beating Galway is a much higher likelihood. But I think if you're talking about good predictions last week, did Football Pod not predict Cavan to get beaten?
Oh, did they?
I don't want to step out of line here, but definitely from what I was hearing, Antrim were looking good for that. But
well, Tommy was predicting that specifically.
Yeah, okay. I think Tommy. It was just Tommy.
13 points off there, Tommy.
In the green this week, just a couple of things to touch on here. Clare and Port Joyce are in the green this week. Two great performances. I'm putting Clare in there for obvious reasons. There was like a real sense of confidence I felt going into yesterday's game against Clare, which I was a little bit surprised by. Obviously, I was wrong to be surprised given the performance that they put in. And maybe the reason why I was surprised is because I actually thought Tipperary were quite good the previous week against a Waterford team that are obviously in decent enough form at the moment. So Tipperary were bad yesterday. They definitely played worse yesterday than they did the previous week. Obviously, a couple of injuries earlier on. John McGrath going off is not an ideal situation if you're already missing some players like Seamus Callan, for example. But Clare, I think, really would have raised a few eyebrows yesterday with that performance. Like Peter Duggan being away for a couple of years and then coming back into his first championship game in 2 years to play to the level that he got to was something that's really going to excite Clare people this year, because he was a cornerstone of an attack that came close to getting to an All-Ireland final in 2018. Shane O'Donnell does not need any introduction. Shane O'Donnell's ceiling does not need any illumination for anybody in Ireland. So to see him playing at the level that he's playing at is unbelievably exciting. And possibly most exciting of all is the fact that they would have won the game without Tony Kelly yesterday. Like arguably the best hurler in Ireland. They didn't even need him. So, Clare must be eyeing up that Cork game and thinking to themselves, we've got a real chance of nicking third spot in this game. And that was always going to be the big upshot yesterday. I think Tipperary are out of it now, having lost back-to-back games. That's not exactly a hot take, but I think Clare would have been out of it had they lost. So this was a huge game yesterday, and Clare stepped up when it really mattered.
Yeah. Clare are going to feel like they're going to cause damage to somebody, certainly when they get out of Munster. And that forward line looks very potent. Like there was a bit where the ball broke. Yeah, well, the ball broke to Tony Kelly, and already Dognan was like, "This should be a point," and it is. Do you know? It's like you can take that to the bank. He is definitely he's only going to reach even higher heights. So they're going to be in games. You'd still say Limerick and Waterford are the top two, and they're the top tier, and they're in a tier on their own, and then everybody else is scrapping it out for that. But that doesn't mean that stuff can't happen in a match. Like an early red card, something happens. A bad decision, a good decision. I don't know. The penalty decision was great. The jersey pulling, penalty, straight penalty. Yeah, it is. And then also take it to the bank. Tony Kelly over the penalty. Yes, please.
Yeah, and even players that didn't even start yesterday, Meehan was due to start. I was really excited to see him at full forward yesterday in his first championship season. So he doesn't even play the game. There's options there, and the squadron's deep, as I say. And even it feels listening to Tommy Walsh on analysis yesterday, feels like they're starting to unlock John Conlon's potential from a deeper position a little bit more as well, if we're just using yesterday in isolation. So yes, it's an overreaction to suggest that Clare are back and are going to land a punch on someone significant this summer, but it's bloody exciting.
It is. It's great to see. And obviously they've got Cork and Semple Stadium next because of Ed Sheeran, so they ain't going to be fearing that at all. Cork are forewarned is the only thing, but if Cork lose that, it's game over for them too, really.
All of a sudden that game is the biggest weekend of that weekend, after Clare Tip being the biggest one of this weekend, I would have thought. So Yeah, Claire definitely the one to watch.
Yeah, delighted for Lohan and delighted for that team. Joyce taking down Mayo as their last one in green. We're going to talk in much more detail about this, but like that was, they had to do, they just had to get over that line, whatever it took.
Yes, yesterday was a huge win for Joyce, and that's kind of why I made the point earlier on that I think that's the bigger storyline from yesterday, just getting over the line as opposed to the Mayo fight back at the end. And there's a load of really exciting bits from Joyce's perspective, not least the tactical tweak to stop Horan ball, giving extra pain to Galway football fans. So they managed to figure that out, and I'm sure Cian O'Neill probably had a part to play in that. That bodes well for them trying to figure out games over the next little while. It's just getting that big win in Croke Park, which will take this team forward. Obviously, they managed to do that in Kevin Walsh's reign of that 2018 season when they won their first game in the Super 8s in Croke Park. So getting back there and getting another win and getting back to the All-Ireland semi-finals is absolutely within Galway's reach this season.
All right, OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs. For an effortless finish to your day, every week we're giving away a Gillette Labs shaving kit to be with a chance of winning. Just let us know who you think should make the performance rankings. We'll read out the best entries a little later on in the show. The best place to enter is the Off the Ball Instagram page. You can see the comments box in our story. We have a packed show still to come. We're talking football with Daniel Harris next. We'll bring you Brian Kerr's thoughts on Manchester United after this quick break.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Marginal gains, XG, top speed, recovery. What's it all about? Want to improve but don't know where to start? With more data than ever now available, OTB Sports have teamed up with Whoop to cut through the noise and help you raise your game, no matter the sport. OTB Sports are delivering the metrics that matter. Meaningful metrics in partnership with Whoop, the personalised digital fitness and health coach that helps you unlock your inner potential. See whoop.com for more. Follow OTB Sports social channels for the best insights and stats this season.
FBD Insurance knows this sound spells trouble for van drivers. But if you're an existing FBD customer, you'll get 15% off a new van insurance policy. It's how we're keeping you and your van on the road. Visit fbd.ie or contact your local branch. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. Terms and conditions apply. 15% discount available on new commercial motor policies only when an existing FBD farm, business, car or home policy is in place. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Commercial motor insurance is underwritten by FBD Insurance plc.
With prices from only €289 for fully comprehensive car insurance, everyone's making the jump to getsetgo.ie. New business policies only. Prices subject to minimum premiums. T's and C's apply. MCL Insurance Services Limited Trading is getsetgo.ie is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
If he does have the power, if he does have total control of transfers, of who stays and who goes, of style of football, week one, what should he do? Who are the players who you would look at that you think have got to go, and who are the couple of guys you've seen either Premier League or around Europe who you think could come in and really transform Manchester United?
Well, the players, and some would agree that some of that has been made easy for him in the likes of Matip, Cavani, his time will be up. Ronaldo, that decision might be made, might be out of his hands as well. Phil Jones would be another one. Lingard would be another one. Possibly Bali, I think, as well, who's another one. So there could be, I've always looked at their squad in the last few years and said they've a very deep squad of players. The problem has been there's not much difference between a lot of them, and that they've been only adequate when they play it. And the areas of the team that need to improve, you'd say bar the goalkeeper, who's had a very, very good season. Nearly every area of the team needs to improve. You could say Ronaldo has been a brilliant goal scorer, but he's not going to stay around and not going to play him just as a goal scorer. Now, suddenly they need a goal scorer. Well, it looked like, I wouldn't say they were quite well off. It looked like Rashford, Greenwood, Cavani, and Ronaldo when he came in, and Martial when they had him, that they were all right there.
And there's a fair chance that there's a possibility that none of those 5 will be even at the club next season.
That's right. Well, I don't think they should dispense with Rashford. I've seen some people saying, some experienced commentators saying Rashford hasn't done anything in the last couple of seasons, it's time to go. I don't believe that. I think he's still a very talented player. He's lost his way on the pitch, I believe, for some reason. He's been part of a club and part of a team that has not performed, and he's been one of the ones he's not had a settled position, and he has kind of floundered while those around him have floundered. So he's one that I would think they should keep.
Right, that's Brian Kerr saying that they should keep Marcus Rashford. Daniel Harris is with us for a bit of a post-mortem on, I guess it's not really a post-mortem because the patient is still alive, just about. Daniel, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Hi, everyone.
I know it feels like a post-mortem. So let's talk about Jesse Lingard first, right? Does Lingard get some kudos for telling the truth, or does Lingard get deducted points for being part of the shit show in the dressing room? I'm
it will never be just about one thing. I mean, with Lingard just to me is a very strange affair in that he did brilliantly. Went on there and did brilliantly at West Ham. I can't understand why he didn't insist on leaving at the end of last season, because there was no obvious place for him in the team. And I don't know what Ole said to him, maybe promised him games, but Lingard should have had enough sense to realise that ultimately he's sort of competing for a spot with Bruno Fernandes or competing for a spot with Rashford and Sancho and Greenwood at the time. And he wasn't going to get to play very many games, and he definitely wasn't going to get to play the big games if everyone was fit. So he should have forced a move then. And also Lingard, I forget how old he is now, he's 28, but he's not close to the beginning of his career. So again, in January, it was said, and I don't know if this is true, I'm not speaking with inside information here, that Spurs would have taken him in January, but he decided to wait it out. And again, like when you've played so rarely in your career in the way that Lingard has, and particularly when you were onto a good thing at West Ham last year where just everything was really working really nicely, I can't understand why he didn't make sure that he left then. And I also can't understand why United didn't make sure he left then either, because now you end up with him grassing up the dressing room to Paul Scholes and being part of everything that's wrong about the dressing room. So I don't care whether he was right or whether he was wrong, whether he said it or whether he didn't, particularly. Like, it's not going to contribute to my memory of Jesse Lingard. And when we all look back at Jesse Lingard, I mean, anyone who was at Wembley when he volleyed in that incredible winner in the cup final that saved United from the ignominy of losing a cup final to Crystal Palace, I mean, that'll be what I remember when I remember Jesse Lingard. It's just, I feel like for his sake, he should have gone in the last summer at the latest.
And what about Scholes, like, taking Lingard's word as some kind of arbiter on what's going on, as opposed to, and then just like, I don't know, it felt strange that Scholes is using Lingard as the dressing room is a shambles for but what's Lingard going to say? It's a great dressing room because he can't get in the team.
I don't believe so. I mean, Scholes is reporting what he's been told. I didn't see the way that he dealt with it because I was at Arsenal. For anyone who is checking up on me, I walked from synagogue, but that was worth it. But anyway, Scholes is just reporting what he's been told. I mean, I'm going to hesitate to call him a journalist, but that is ultimately what we're talking about here. So a source tells you something, and presumably doesn't.
You reveal that source straight away. It's like
presumably he didn't say he couldn't, and if he did, obviously, then that's bad form from Scholes. But I wouldn't. When someone tells me that the dressing room is like that, and the football, everything I see on the pitch tells me that the dressing room is probably like that, I'm not going to be shooting the messenger. It's a matter of trying to think, well, why is it like that, and what is going to be done to make it not like that? And will a new manager and a massive clear out be enough? Hopefully it will.
The list of players who will be cleared out seems huge, because why would you keep any of those players who have failed, who are out of contract? And then it's the players who are in contract that are going to be harder to move out. But like, how quickly does somebody who has a philosophy actually, how quickly can they have an impact? I
guess they've got pre-season. In terms of the players that are going, some of the players are just going to leave. Mata, Matic, Lingard, Cavani and Pogba are just going to go. And there's a proper expensive player just in the saved wages there. You can go. Pogba's on 300 grand a week. That's 15 million pound a year. Cavani's on not that much less than that. There's a player there, so those players will just go. Then one of United's problems of late has been a refusal to shift players who they don't want when they get offers that they think are inadequate for them. And what ends up happening is rather those players sit around taking wages, probably not adding a whole lot to the dressing room, and then you end up having to let them go for nothing or even less. And where Ten Hag has to be firm, and where I hope he'll be allowed to be firm, because ultimately John Murtough and Darren Fletcher, they work for the Glazers, but they're much more interested in the football team being good than Ed Woodward. And so hopefully Richard Arnold is too, but there've been people who've been empowered in some way to run the football side of the club, of what I hate to call, but ultimately reality forces me to call the business. They're running the football side. So then you've got players like Phil Jones, Andreas Pereira, Anthony Martial, all the fullbacks, who you would hope that the club will take an offer. The best offer that they can get for Martial will be sold, because ultimately they don't want him cluttering up the place, because he's not got a future at United. So those are the players that the club have struggled to shift over the last few years. And at this point, they just need to take whatever they can get for those players and move them on.
The problem obviously is, and I think it might have been one of the Lingard issues, was that the wages at Manchester United are so much better than they are at other clubs. So Manchester United, to do that, they probably end up having to pay some of the wages over the next couple of years. And that actually might be worth it. To start again, to reset the wage structure and to stop having players who are on 100 grand a week but who are actually 20 grand a week players.
That's definitely worth it. I mean, it's really hard to measure what a player's worth, but someone like Eric Bailly, you're not going to pick him, because what's going to happen is the new manager's going to come in, he's probably going to want to buy a centre-back. So Bailly's not going to play. So you're paying him to do nothing, or you're paying a bit less for him to be somewhere else and not be anything to do with you anymore. Same with Martial. So and there'll be a point at which also the players will either want to play or they won't. And if the manager has the kind of conversation that Solskjaer should have had last summer with some of those players, saying, there's absolutely no future for you here, you're a lovely boy, but you need to find your agent. You need to get your agent to find you a new club. And if you have that kind of conversation, I don't think there are that many players who would just sit there and do nothing. I don't know. I think if he'd have said that to Lingard, I've got absolutely no intention of ever playing you, then Lingard would have probably been forced to go, because they are footballers. They've sacrificed a lot to be footballers. They want to play football. And okay, when he got into the last 6 months, maybe Lingard did decide to wait it out. I don't know. But if he'd had that conversation last summer, I think that he would have gone. And that's the conversation that Ten Hag needs to have with as many players as he possibly can that he doesn't want. And as I said, it's not just those players. You've got Brandon Williams also. You get a few quid for Brandon Williams, and whatever the price you get for Brandon Williams, that's what the market tells you he's worth. That's the price you got to take. I'd be looking to shift at least one of Diogo Dalot and Aaron Wan-Bissaka as well. I'd be looking to shift Alex Telles if I could, because ultimately there are very few players at United that you're certain are good enough, or that you even think might be good enough, and those three aren't.
Tomorrow is the one-year anniversary of Manchester United handing Eric Bailly a new contract until the summer of 2024, with the option of an extra year. There are a number of different things that you can ask this question about, but how did that happen?
I guess they thought that the offer for him wasn't enough, so that if they gave him a contract, then the contract, because he was then United for a couple more years than previously, then his contract would then that would immediately increase his value. I think probably what happened, I know I've been blaming Ole for this, and I do blame Ole for this. I think there's probably a point at which he didn't trust the owners, so that if you've got a player who you think you might use, who you wouldn't mind, who doesn't disgust you, then you might try and keep them, because if that player goes, you're not certain that you're going to be given the money to reinvest, or that money to reinvest will help you because it won't be enough. So I think it was probably a combination of those two things. United trying to preserve Bailly's value, and Ole being fear of losing a player he felt he might have to need when he wasn't sure that he'd be able to replace him.
So let's say Ten Hag comes in with a philosophy and a clear style, and all the signings are made with the express intention of that player only ever playing because the manager wants him and he fits into that style of play, and we stop having these kind of random, this player's available, that player's available. We got linked with this player and we've been linked with him for so long that we really should buy him, because otherwise it's going to look like something. How quickly can that have an impact? Because everybody talks about Klopp, but Klopp's a genius, and it didn't take him. It didn't work straight away for him. He came in and loads of players got injured, and they didn't finish in the Champions League places, and obviously they reached the Europa League final, so there was something cooking in the background, but it wasn't straight away everything is fixed.
No, and Klopp, we have to remember with Klopp, I mean, his genius, his principal genius, is not dissimilar to Fergie. He's a human resources genius. If you gave anyone else Klopp's players, they wouldn't be anything like what they are now. It's Klopp who's made them into this awesome machine, and Ten Hag probably doesn't have that. So he's going to need to do it slightly differently. I mean, I'm sure he can make the players love him, because if you give people their chance, then they'll feel affinity to you. I mean, Arsenal's a good example of that. Mikel Arteta has absolutely no charisma whatsoever, but the players are doing it for him because he's got young players and he's giving them their chance. And as for how long it will take, I thought probably the game against Arsenal was not a bad indicator of the fact that you can turn things around here quite quickly, because I thought that United played better than Arsenal did. And they didn't get the decisions went against them, and that's not why they lost. They lost because they didn't play well enough to win. But when you're crap and the decisions go against you like they did at the weekend, it's a problem. But watching Arsenal, who might finish fourth, might finish fifth, United, I thought, were better than them, and Arsenal didn't look like they were getting their fullbacks back and a centre forward away from being seriously good again. So I would say that if Ten Hag is able to implement his vision and buys well, I'd be surprised if United couldn't finish quite comfortably in the top four next season, because there are still some good players there, and we saw that the other day. Rafael Varane, obviously horrendous error for the first goal, but he's a very good player, and if you put him next to the dominant centre back that you need to buy, then he'll be much better. United didn't have Luke Shaw, who, okay, he's not reliable, but he is definitely the last of the fullbacks I would sell. And then you saw in midfield that they're still much too easy to get through. They don't defend well enough. They don't score goals well enough, but they do have the players able to create chances. Jadon Sancho had some good moments in that game. Anthony Elangary had some good moments in that game, although I do worry about his technique, that at his age, it feels like there's certain things that you can learn, composure in front of goal, the right runs to make, but the touch, particularly under pressure, is something that you feel like the best players already have that locked down at this point, and he doesn't. But if you look at that United team, they could leave that pitch feeling that they should have beaten Arsenal, and the only difference really between that game and the other games we've been seeing was some effort. So Ten Hag, if he gets 3 or 4 or 5 players that he needs and wants, and he's able to inculcate what he demands of them, then United should be able to get quite a lot better quite quickly. It doesn't mean that they'll be challenging for the title next season, and maybe not all the season after, but where they are now has a lot of room for improvement, because they basically hit rock bottom, and at that point it should be quite easy to improve quite a lot quite quickly.
And there's also kind of the fact that when you talk about finishing top 4 comfortably next season, or chance of that happening, like you do look around at the other clubs around Manchester United. There's a story on the back of, I think, the London Times this morning, that if Poch gets sacked by Tottenham, Conte could get poached by Paris Saint-Germain. Obviously Chelsea are going through their troubles. Tuchel said yesterday that Rudiger is leaving the club because of the fact that they can't afford to pay his wages anymore, the wages that he's looking for. So there is a number of different stories around Manchester United and around that top 4, which would suggest that there could be a few regressions potentially over the course of this summer.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously, City and Liverpool are ahead by some distance, and it's almost inconceivable that you could close that gap over the course of the summer. Sorry. However well you coach and however well you buy, because both teams have been playing together for a long time, and to get that good takes time, because you have to groove your system, and we've seen it. It took Guardiola the time when he first came, and it took him a bit of last season as well to kind of develop this new version of the team. And it wasn't until the winter where City really pulled away from everyone. It took Klopp to groove this Liverpool team. And what we're seeing with Liverpool, what we see yesterday, is what they're now able to do is, because everything works so well, they're able to bring players on, put players in, take players out with no apparent difference, partly because they've bought well again, and also just because there's a method, and all the players know what the method is. the method, I mean, I'm sure it gets tweaked from game to game and honed on training ground, but in general, the principles, the things that Klopp asks of his team don't change. And the thing particularly with Klopp is the thing that underpins it all is hard work. And it's going to take some time for the things that those top two teams do for Ten Hag to be able to inculcate them. But Arsenal, Spurs and Chelsea are not miles ahead of United, even now, in talent. They're ahead of United because in terms of application and in terms of, and obviously Tuchel's a much better manager than the manager that United have, as is Conte. So those are distances that United should be able to close by working well in the summer. Whether United actually pulled that off is, I mean, it remains to be seen. I mean, because we can't trust United in general because they've been untrustworthy under the Glazers, and we can't trust United in general because Fletcher and Merton don't have any kind of experience, and the extent of the work that is required this summer by people who are inexperienced, I mean, you don't know if they'll be any good at it, but they can't be any worse at it than Edward Wood and Matt Judge were. So to that extent, I would expect United to be able to do some decent work in closing that gap.
All right, Daniel, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
No worries, have a good day, everyone.
It's Daniel Harris giving us some thoughts on the situation at Manchester United. It is a big risk letting the two lads be in charge of all their transfer policy with Ten Hag. You assume that somebody in the scouting network, that Ten Hag has somebody who is going to help discover the players they need.
And also as well the fact that the track record isn't exactly great with the current structures that exist.
Terrible. Like it's as abysmal as it could possibly be. Like, but even when they sign good players like Sancho, they come in and they flop.
Yeah.
Like
you looked at that starting team on BT on Saturday, and like you're looking at it from an Arsenal perspective, and you're like, that's a team that could do a lot of damage to Arsenal. So like there's still that vague notion that on paper that team should be a lot better than it is.
Could Anthony Martial come back and be good? Could Van de Beek come back and be good?
Possibly, and like I mean, there have been questions as we've had this conversation before about Martial on an international level as well from different managers. So it's not just been at Manchester United, but definitely the quality is there, and he even showed glimpses. Like right after COVID, Martial was on fire for a few weeks.
And got injured, was it?
And the season ended.
It's 8:32 this morning. Team OTB are taking on Try a Thigh this June. It's all in partnership with Whoop, the personalised digital fitness and health coach that helps you unlock your inner potential. Adrian Barry is with us. Adrian, good morning to you.
Morning, gents. How are we doing?
You're an old man. What are you doing?
There's an invite. If I ever heard one, yeah. I think I'm going to end up doing the swim and the run, probably, Jared. Yeah.
Right. And how is your swimming and running? So Try a Thigh is like it's the end of May, start of June, right? It's that kind of whatever the bank holiday weekend is, which is pretty soon, Adrian. There's the month of May.
Well, I've done nothing. Have you been keeping up?
Oh, I've been swimming. Every day after work. I haven't
you done a whole lot.
Oh yeah, so I had a minor incident last Thursday, I want to say, where I was like getting to swim. Normally the swimming pool is empty because we're obviously there slightly off peak times, and there was a bunch of people who were kind of in small groups. I was like, this is a bit weird, so I was swimming around them. And then all of a sudden the music starts and out pops the aqua aerobics teacher.
Oh.
And so I'm like in the middle of it. I'm like, well, I can ostentatiously leave now, or I can just join in.
And?
I joined in.
How was it?
Good man.
Well, as girls just want to have fun, blare it out over the tannoy, I'm like, it was really good.
What's your go-to water aerobics move?
It turns out there are multiple ones.
Right.
Yeah. Which are well, when you're like a fat calcified 44-year-old, everything is hard.
Was it like star jumps and stuff like that?
There are star jumps, yeah. There's like running through the water. There's like kicking your opposite foot.
Okay.
There's
was the only one of your demographic in there?
Pretty much. It's good to be the youngest person in the room again for a change,
Yeah.
Yeah. I had one of those experiences recently, and it's prompted me to reassess my entire being. Very similar experience, except for it was an exercise class, and I was late, and it was all rather embarrassing. But coupled with myself and Eoin chatted a couple of months back about I was going back to do a bit of hurling, coupled with that where I basically wasn't able to walk properly and early after the exercise itself much at all. For up to 3 weeks afterwards, I was going back doing that bit of hurling, and I just thought I need to stop doing that, and I also need to address this issue I've had at my knees for about 20 years, I'd say. But it was like this sort of a slow onset where you kind of think, no, it'll be, I'm never going to do enough anyway to really warrant putting in the yards that you need to do if you go to a physio. So I did bits and pieces of it, but basically I got it properly seen to about 6 weeks ago, and I have a thing called patellar tendinopathy, which is
of course
really
you
painful. It's the tendon that joins your knee to your shin, and there's a particular area, particularly just under the lower end of my right knee, that the thing that probably was like I couldn't even kneel down on the thing. You know what I mean? You're playing around with the kids and you go to kneel on your knee and it's agony, and it's like, you're right, okay, I don't need to accept that I'm creeping through middle age here. I'm barely able to walk. So I went and got it seen to. So I'm not doing any actual training for the triathlon, but I'm doing a program of exercises and stretches 4 times a week. It's about 40 minutes, and it's total torture.
Right. And does that register on the strain?
Yeah.
It
does, and it tells me I'm very strained by doing it, which gives me some reassurance, right? Because like you end up after 40 minutes in an absolute ball of sweat, you're knackered. Like, it's, if I'd gone for a 20-minute run, I would expect to feel similar levels of like fatigue afterwards. But yeah, no, it's I put it in under functional fitness on the app, and it's telling me, like the last one I did on Saturday, 7.8 strain. So that'd be pretty high, wouldn't it? 6.4 before that. That'd be pretty high on the strain factor. But it's tough going, and I'm working off the assumption, and like it's just now that you're talking about the date, I'm realizing how quickly it's coming up. And the swimming, of course, I can do anytime because it's actually pretty good for it. Cycling, it turns out, is pretty good for this condition as well. Running, not so much. So
why don't you do the whole thing? Come on, you can do the whole thing. If you can do the swim and the run, once you can do the run, you can do the whole thing. I can't run. I've got shin splint, so I'm going to do the other 2 bits. There you are, like
support and scoring on my patellar tendinopathy, and you're like crying off with shin splints.
Well, no, you just have something fancy. That's of course you got the most fancy thing available.
Diagnosed. Yeah, look, I could do. I know there are some gaps to be filled in. I'm taking one for the team here, basically, Ger. There are some gaps to be filled in with some of the legs that need doing. So,
of course, Eoin has quietly gone about becoming a cyclist in the meantime, but has steadfastly refused to get involved in this for fear of another humiliation.
I too have patellar tendinopathy. I'm just a disgrace.
It's painful, lads. I'm not going to lie to you. It's. I know you're laughing about it, but bloody hell, yes. It's painful, and it's the sort of thing, right? Where I've been to see. So I went to see the physio. I go to see him once every 2-3 weeks. He'd give you a program, he'll give you an update, figure out how you're getting on, and it's committing to that. It's tough. Like, good luck with the triathlon training, and you go out for a bit of a run, and you go for a swim and a cycle, and at least you're building up the fitness. With this thing, like I've been doing it now for whatever it is, like 5 weeks, and I feel and he tells me this is just the way it has to be for the next little while. I feel no positive impact from it at all. Like it's as if I've done nothing in terms of the pain in my knees still. So I've palmogrannies basically, and I'm trying to work through it.
All right, well, the exercise bike is going to be your friend then over the next while. Well, we wish you the very best of luck with that. What are the main benefits so far of having a wearable coach advising you, go a bit harder, get to bed, which is exactly what the Whoop 4.0 does? What are the benefits for you?
Well, when you're out on a Saturday night, and it tells you, you think you've been in bed for like 8 or 9 hours, and the Whoop is telling you, you didn't get that much quality sleep. That's definitely one element of it. I've taken reassurance from the fact that it's telling me I'm actually getting a proper workout. Like when I'm talking to the physio afterwards, and I'm like, listen, I'm knackered here. This level of loading that you're giving me on the upper end, and I've got the evidence there. He's not just like this guy's spoofing it up. So no, it's been really useful on that front, and I will be interested to see once I get out, and I will obviously have to go and I'll be doing a swim. I've got my aqua band as well when I get into the pool and do some proper swimming to build up that bit of mileage as well. So I'll be interested to see what happens there. But yeah, the sleep thing is interesting, and definitely giving me the level of exertion that confirming the level of exertion, Jared, that I know I'm actually doing has been powerful.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I've done more than I actually have. That's the bit that I need to catch up with, or I need to make the Whoop catch up with me.
The Bluetooth must have dropped out there for about 15 minutes.
Adrian, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Thanks, lads.
Team OTB are taking on Triathlon this June. It's all in partnership with Whoop, the personalised digital fitness and health coach that helps you unlock your inner potential. What do you think your inner potential is, Eoin?
Oh, God, just it's I don't know what it's going to turn out to be once it gets unlocked. Wow, it's just this beast, this athletic beast that's ready to conquer the world.
It's athletic, is it?
Yeah, 100%. But something that the Whoop would pick up. So that has to be athletics, doesn't it?
Snark. It doesn't have a
no.
The fifth pillar isn't snarkiness.
I wish it was. How did aerobics go on your Whoop?
Well, it was higher than it would have been if I had just been swimming. Because like, there's the other thing that I did definitely realise, and we had Brian Driscoll on Friday night, and he was like, he needs somebody to help him go training, otherwise he won't do it. And like being involved in a class and more people, the peer pressure of that was definitely better than I've done like 7 minutes in the pool here. I can easily hop out and sit in the sauna for 10 minutes and that'll be my 15 minutes of exercise. So being forced to stay there and do stuff, that was good for you.
Yeah, I know. You're a good swimmer though.
I can swim, but
you can. That's probably my level of being a good swimmer. Actually, being able to swim.
Well, there were other better swimmers in our little group. Tom Malone was the best swimmer.
Oh, Tom Malone was absolutely outstanding.
Like a fish.
Yeah.
It's 8:40. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Come on, Daniel. He stayed. That's Lingard because he's on a huge contract. West Ham couldn't come close to matching it. No, but the point was that Manchester United could have given him 50 grand a week or 35 grand a week to top up whatever West Ham were doing to get rid of him. MOC says good riddance to the lot of them. And Porrick says shock of the weekend for me was Eoin telling us Tony Kelly was only 28. I thought he was in the same age group as Joe Canning and those. No, there's still a possibility that we haven't seen the peak yet of Tony Kelly, and that's why something weird could happen. He's fully fit. He's had a largely uninterrupted league campaign. They have Shane O'Donnell back. They have Duggan back. That's a forward line now that you're like, what's going to happen here?
Yeah,
they can attack us in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, it's 10 seasons now, Tony Kelly. At the end of this year, so he'll probably there's a lot of hurling that's to be played, but he's just been excellent since what do you say? Anthony Martial was excellent after COVID. Kelly went up a level after COVID as well. It felt that 2020 season was where it was like, okay, he's back.
And I remember having him on after that, and he was talking about just loving that time of the year because obviously he'd been sensational for the club in winter as well, and now he's actually. It's a bit wintry. It was a bit cold. It was a bit chilly. And he's just like, he's going to score that from everywhere in the pitch. Can't believe why, when all the football is being played by Manchester City and Liverpool, everyone seems to be fascinated by the shit show of Manchester United at the moment, says Barry. What are you talking about, Barry? It's one of the greatest stories in the history of world football. It's like a constant, everyday, exploding clown car. Exactly. Carl Maloney, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. How are you? I'm good. I can't complain.
I'm blaming long COVID for that. Where are we starting?
Well, let's start with football from yesterday. And Liverpool back to within a point of Premier League leaders Manchester City after a 2-0 win against Everton in the Merseyside derby. Second half goals from Andy Robertson and sub Divock Origi sealed victory at Anfield to keep Jurgen Klopp's side in the title race with 5 games left to play. Elsewhere, Burnley moved above Everton at the other end of the table thanks to a 1-0 win over Wolves, while Chelsea beat West Ham by the same scoreline, and Brighton and Southampton played out a 2-2 draw. Action this evening as well. Leeds can move 7 points clear of the relegation zone tonight. That's if they beat Crystal Palace. Kickoff for that game is at 8 o'clock at Selhurst Park. Here at home in Gillette Games yesterday, Johnny Heaney's early goal proved decisive as Galway beat Mayo in their Connacht Football Championship clash at McHale Park yesterday. The tribesmen were 114 to 16 points winners to set up a semi-final meeting with Leitrim. In Ulster, big win for Donegal. They beat Armagh by 116 to 12 and they'll play Cavan in the last 4. In Leinster, a hat-trick for Kevin Quinn was the highlight as Wicklow beat Laois by 5-15 to 4-12 in Aughrim to advance to a Leinster quarter-final against Meath next weekend. John Mahon's Offaly heading for the Tailteann Cup following a 115 to 112 loss to Wexford, while Louth beat Carlow by 5-10 to 10 points. And in hurling, Tipperary remain without a win after 2 rounds of the Munster Championship after the 321 to 216 defeat to Clare. That game was at Semple Stadium yesterday and Tony Kelly scored 1-7 for the winners. Some Gaelic Games action tonight as well. That's the Munster Under-20 football final. Kerry take on Cork. Throw-in for that match is at 7:30. In rugby, the Ireland Ireland women's rugby head coach Greg McWilliams says the Chargers will stay positive despite a heavy defeat to England in the Six Nations yesterday. They conceded 59 points in the second half as they lost by 69 points to 0 at Welford Road. Seni Nayupu receiving a second half red card. Dorothy Wall was also sin-binned in the second half, and Ireland conclude their campaign at home to Scotland next weekend. In golf last night, Xander Schauffele and Patrick Cantlay held their nerve in the back nine to win the Euro Classic of New Orleans last night. The American pair ended on 29 under par. That was 2 shots better than Sam Burns and Billy Horschel. Shane Lowry and Ian Poulter finished in 13th on a final total of 21 under. The World Snooker Championship continues this afternoon. Neil Robertson trails by 2 frames ahead of the resumption of his second round match against Jack Lisowski. 9-7 in favour of Lisowski in that match. Judd Trump, meanwhile, 3 frames away from booking his place in the next round. He leads Anthony McGill by 10 frames to 6, and the first to 13 in both of those matches set to progress to the next round. And there's racing finally at Naas this evening, where the first is off at 4:45.
Which games were you at the weekend?
I was at Kilkenny and Laois in the hurling on Saturday, and then yesterday I was watching Wicklow and Laois in the football.
Oh,
which
right.
was an absolute cracker.
Right.
It was brilliant. Wicklow were brilliant, and Laois, in fairness to them as well, kept coming back. Wicklow did lead at one stage by 5-13 to 2-6. And Laois kind of rallied towards the end, but it was a huge result for Wicklow. Kevin Quinn got a hat-trick.
Did it feel like when the 5-13 to 2-6 was becoming 5-13 to 4-12 that there was something in it, or it never felt?
Yeah, there was actually a goal-mouth scramble towards the end as well that Laois almost got another goal as the game entered injury time, and actually after that their corner forward Gary Walsh got sent off. So there was a chance maybe that they could have pulled it back, but for Wicklow it's a huge result because they obviously had a management change over mid-season as well. They struggled in the league. Both of those teams were relegated from Division 3, so it's a real boost for Wicklow to get that result. And Aughrim, still a notoriously difficult place to go for every team really. Laois will have to rebound now for the Tailteann Cup and the Leinster Football Championship. I mean, everyone has been talking about the fact that it's dead and everything like that, but this weekend, I mean, the 2 biggest results, arguably you could say, was Wicklow's win over Laois and Wexford beating Offaly, which was another huge result, given Offaly's upward trajectory, you would have thought, in the last couple of years, and Wexford had struggled in Division 4 this year as well, but that's another big win for them at Wexford Park, and they play the Dubs, I think, next week, so they've pushed Dublin close before as well, haven't they, in recent years? So
just last year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was the start of the disease, the virus getting into the system in the Dubs.
Yeah, and you'd have to say that they've kind of maybe looked like their form has regressed a little bit further than that as well in Chadwick's Wexford Park as well. Live on Sky Sports, set up for a famous night for Wexford.
And then the Kilkenny Hurlers, very difficult to tell exactly.
Yeah, I mean, Laois have been ravaged by injuries this year. They lost 2 more players, having pushed Dublin close the week before. Podge Delaney with a serious shoulder or collarbone injury, I think, the week before, their co-captain, so obviously that was a big loss. And Ross King, the corner forward, missed out on this week's game as well through injury, and they've been plagued by injury this year. But Kilkenny look really good. I think they've obviously motored quite quietly so far because they've played Westmeath and Laois, who are generally considered the 2 weakest teams in the Leinster Championship. But the big game now next weekend in Salthill, Galway against Kilkenny, it's going to be very interesting to see. But I mean, Kilkenny had TJ Reid back this week. Adrian Mullen scored 6 points from midfield. A lot of positives for them. They did a lot of stuff right and scored 234, and they've racked up 2 big scores, which is important in the context of that championship in terms of scoring difference. But I suppose the real litmus test now is their 3 games coming up: Galway, Wexford and Dublin. You'll really see where they are. But I do get the sense that Kilkenny might have a say in the latter stages.
Well, it's worked out very well for them in terms of the fixture list. At the end of the league, you want to make sure that all the Ballyhale players are back in and eased in nice and gently, and you've got 2 fairly handy games to start with.
Yeah, true. Now, they didn't impress against Westmeath in the first half. I think Westmeath at one stage led by 4 points, and Kilkenny were only 3 ahead of the break in the first half of their game the week before in Mullingar. But they pulled away and scored something like 5-23 in that match in the end, and then 2-34 the last night as well. But, I mean, Galway probably, by all accounts, they weren't overly impressive in either of their matches so far. And obviously slipped to that result against Wexford, the draw in the first round, so they'll have a bit between the teeth. And obviously you have the Henry Shefflin, Brian Cody factor that's going to be, I suspect, well covered in the media this week in the lead up to that game. It really is going to be interesting, the sideline battle there. And Galway probably do need to produce a big performance at least, and if they could pull a result, you feel it'd be a big one for Henry Shefflin so early on in his tenure.
All right, Carl, good stuff. Thanks very much for that.
Lads.
It's 8:48. Roy Keane is being linked with the Hibs job, Eoin. What do you think of this?
Well, Hibs are obviously choosing madness, isn't it? Like to go down this path. Not that it wouldn't necessarily work out. I think that there's still a chance that Roy Keane could do a job somewhere, but it's definitely a little bit of left field thinking at the moment to think that a manager who can take you forward is Roy Keane. Like they had Sean Maloney, they sacked him after. I guess he kind of like grafted up the ranks to a certain degree over the last little while. He was involved with Belgium. And it seemed that he had kind of like a good fledgling career. It seems that the ownership at Hibs wouldn't be kind of too kind of capable of swerving chaos, and they're deciding that Roy Keane may be the job for them. Going back to Scotland, obviously, it could be something that interests Roy Keane. Going back into management is something that definitely interests Roy Keane. It seems like it does seem though that he's given out mixed messages over the last while, being like, I'm done, I'm not done. Where it seems the most recent utterances have been, I'm ready to go back in again.
Well, he just did a podcast with somebody. Was it Carragher?
Yeah, where he says he's done, and then did he not say something since then again?
Oh, did he? I missed that bit.
That he was ready to go back in again. I don't think that he can.
This
really
is another bunch of Americans who are based in America, as opposed to like the chairman sitting there every day who's the owner, like grafting to try and create something and a new culture. And it's like, no, you can't do this. Now, Edinburgh's a very nice part of the world. That would be like, it's not Sunderland, it's not Glasgow, it's Edinburgh. You could live a very nice life in Edinburgh.
Yeah. Like, I mean, we were like, maybe these people who run Hibernian look at the club like the owners of Manchester United do, where it's like having Roy Keane at the helm would be a very good commercial decision. Like signing Paul Pogba for Manchester United was a very good commercial decision.
Maybe. I'm sorry, I was just down a minor Succession wormhole in my own brain there. I was like, oh, I bought your hearts. Hibs. And maybe I don't know, is there maybe there's a Roman Roy in the background here, and Roman Roy and Roy Keane would be like absolute box office dynamite.
Like, see, that's the thing. People are like, oh, you'll take Roy Keane away from our televisions and all that entertainment will be gone. I think Roy Keane being an actual football manager again is pretty entertaining.
Yeah, it is, but he's just not on every week. Like,
he will be. He'll be on in his pre-match press conference every week and his post-match press conference.
He'll have to dial that down. Questions only about Hibs, please. No, seriously, stop asking questions about everything else. Where do you think of Ten Hag? Oh, no comment. I've been told not to comment. Right, OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. It's 8:51. Porrick Joyce spoke with Aisling O'Reilly after his side saw off Mayo yesterday. Enjoy this.
For 15 minutes in the second half, we went flat again. So you can't do that against a good team like Galway and hope to win it. But having said that, we had 17 chances in the second half and we kicked 7 of them. So you're not going to win anything with that either. So look, we got what we deserved today, unfortunately.
Third quarter was tough. I think it was the first and 22nd minute were the scores, and losing Oisin Mullen in that period as well. It just seemed to take the wind out of the sails a bit. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I think it did. Yeah, it went a bit flat, and we were struggling definitely to generate anything during that period. I think Lee kicked a point to get us going, and we took off from there again. But they're the things we're trying to cut out of the game, regardless of what happens. Trying to keep going at a certain level. So we just didn't do that for long enough today, and got the result, unfortunately. Do you know yet how bad that injury is? It's probably very early. No, he's wrapped up in there. Scan tomorrow, and we'll see where it is. And qualifier route next, James, but it's not unknown to this team and these players. Yeah, I suppose previous years we might have had the chance that we'll have this year, so we could afford 6 weeks. So we'll certainly stick together and be strong, and we'll work hard to try and be in better shape for the next game.
And James, the likes. Go ahead.
Instead of, say, 2 weeks, you would be playing Leitrim if you'd won today, a 6-week layoff. How are you going to approach that? Are you going to give lads a week off, or what's the mindset? There'll be, we'll meet next Friday, but we've a lot of guys that have very little work done, from injuries, etc. So it'll be a great chance to get a lot of guys. Get them up to the level that they can get to. So we'll use that wisely. But we'll just take a break and just reflect a little bit on today, and we'll fire up again next Friday. And how's Paddy Jerkin's injury? Paddy's good. He was. He'll be very close in the next week or so to full training.
Is the total of injuries just too much at the moment, James? Given the level of the quality of the player you're missing, no teams going to really be able to cope with that.
Yeah, it's far from ideal. We have a lot of players that had very little work done in the last 3 weeks. I suppose just getting them back to a level where they can compete. So it's far from ideal, yeah. And you have a lot of modified sessions or whatever. But we have a strong panel, and we gave a lot of fellas during the league game time, and for that reason, there's always going to be an attrition rate in Gaelic football, particularly with the travel and everything that we had this year. So it is what it is, but it's not ideal for sure.
The rivalry between Galway and Mayo, it's been fantastic over the years, but your first defeat as a manager to Galway, does that add another layer of pain to it? All right, any defeat is tough. And the manner of defeat too can be tough, but it's done. We'll take what we can from it and try and figure some more stuff out. We need to move on straight away, so that's just the way it is.
That's obviously James Horan there speaking to the assembled press in the immediate aftermath of their 1-point defeat to Galway in the Connacht Football Championship yesterday. Roy Keane would only go to Scotland if it was to manage Celtic, says Patsy, but that's not true, Patsy. I mean, he was offered the Celtic job, it seems, and then decided not to take it, and it now seems as if the soundings coming from his camp are that he is interested in this Hibs job. So I don't know, it doesn't seem to make that much sense on any level for anybody, really. Like, we've been through this with Sunderland.
I was just about to say, like, are we just going to have the exact same conversation now?
Yeah, to stay on TV, you're really good at it. You actually seem to be enjoying it.
But it does make sense, though. It does make sense on some level. Roy Keane has a competitive edge that he wants to scratch.
I mean, but is Hibs going to give you the opportunity to do that?
Yeah.
How?
Every football club does.
It doesn't, because you're up against Celtic and Rangers. That league is skewed. Like, the best you can ever hope for is to finish third, and if you finish third, you've done a good job.
Yeah.
And
week in, week out, you're playing games, you're managing a team, you're overseeing, that charge to third, if they can get there.
If he wants to be involved in football, come back and take Cork City, or better still, Cove Ramblers. Go out and live in Cove. It's a nice part of the world. He talked about moving home before. Definitely, now's the time. If you're interested in football, like, what are you going to Hibs for? What's the point of that?
I can see, it is a bit random, but it is still like a football club. Then the general idea of him going back into football management does make sense on some perspective. Like, from his perspective, it does.
But it's a bad career move.
That's a different thing.
A very long time.
That's a different thing.
A really very long time since he was involved at that level.
Yeah, I think that's just a different conversation. Whether or not it'll work out or not, I don't know.
All right. 8:56 this morning. Time to turn to rugby. Alan Quinlan is with us. Alan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. Good, thanks.
The sentiment amongst the Munster fans, the arrow's pointing up. It's back-to-back wins in big games on the road against a provincial rival. In a match that, it looked like they were comfortable in for most of the time.
Yeah, they were pretty comfortable. I think it was a very good performance given the expectation going up there and the danger of playing in the Kingspan. And I suppose Ulster looked like a side that were still probably reeling from the loss against Toulouse the week before, but a little bit of consistency in selection. I know there was a few changes, but performance-wise, it gives them a bit of hope now that if they can, build on what they've done the last couple of weeks, they have a decent chance of doing okay in the playoffs and being better prepared for Toulouse in a couple of weeks. But I think that you can see the confidence and the passing is a lot better, and still worries and concerns around some of the set piece, but it was a lot better, Ger.
Is Craig Casey first choice now, or what's the level of competition at? Where's the pendulum?
It's a difficult one. It's one I keep getting asked. I think he's shown he's a top quality player. I think he's still prone to making a mistake or two. Some of his kicking it's not as good as Conor Murray. But to be fair to Conor Murray, he was really good in the 2 extra games as well. So I think having the ability to have either or start, and probably the gap that we spoke about for years with Ireland, particularly around Conor Murray and Johnny Sexton, well, it's closed a little bit with Munster, and I think he is kind of putting his hand up for selection, particularly this time of year. When you have to attack teams, and he does add a little bit more as regards that pace and zip, but Conor Murray is still I think he's played, like I said, played very well in the last couple of weeks. So I'm not sure. Would you start Craig Casey against Toulouse, or would you start Conor Murray? You know, Murray was vital in the 2 weeks, the 2 games against Exeter, given his size and physical presence. He had some turnovers in that game. So they both have different strengths. I think Craig Casey's strength is obviously his passing and speed delivery, and Conor Murray's still very, very important defensively for Munster when he plays. So I'm not really sure who you start in that game. I suspect that Eoin van Graan will still go for Conor Murray, given his experience and that physical presence that he has. But certainly the signs are good that, you know, in maybe some of the evolution and change that's needed, that Craig Casey is going to be a big part of that going forward.
Yeah, so the future is bright, but the present is actually pretty bright as well, and that you do have a player who's being driven to reach the levels that we know he's capable of in Murray, and that if he comes off, or if he's injured, or if anything happens, that you've got a replacement now who's not going to be in any way overwhelmed by what's happening.
I think if Conor Murray was injured, there wouldn't be as much panic that Craig Casey is coming in. There'd be no panic at all, really. I think he's improved his game a lot, and obviously when you're training with the Irish squad and seeing the different standards there, and we know he can be, you know, we know Craig Casey's qualities and what he can do, and he's shown us glimpses, lots of glimpses of that. I think just some of the game management and some of the decision making, and that's obvious. He's still a very young player, but it's still pretty positive for Munster. But it's much better in the last couple of weeks that, you know, they've got some positive results. I think that is a big result there. They hadn't won in Belfast since 2016, so it instills a bit of confidence and belief in the side. And I think the Keith Earls try was as good a try as I've seen from Munster in years. So I think they're probably feeling good about themselves. They've Cardiff at home next week now, and then Leinster as well. So they could have been 8th there, and we were talking Friday with Adrian about the results, the way they could have panned out. Munster could easily have been down to 8th, and they would have been, because the Bulls now are 8th and 48 points. That's where Munster would have sat if they lost the game. So they're up to 3rd now, and they're in a decent place, I suppose, and they're with 2 games left.
Obviously the questions around Munster at the moment, while things are positive, are about the coaching ticket and who's going to be in there next year. Like, one of the links over the last couple of days has been with Dennis Leamy, and Bernard Jackman was making the point in the paper yesterday that he'd bring a good wealth of knowledge about some of the academy prospects going through at Leinster as well. Is there any truth to this? Is there anything that you've heard that suggests that Leamy could be making a bit of a Munster comeback?
Not really. I'm just hearing the rumours as well. I'm sure Leinster won't want to lose him. I think he probably slipped through the net in Munster, and Leinster picked him up a couple of years ago with their academy, and obviously Leo's impressed with him, brought him into the senior squad. And, you know, I heard Josh van der Fleer speaking about him. He's kind of been sitting behind the scenes quietly, hasn't he, in Leinster, and not a lot said. He's not there on match days. He does the contact skills and breakdown work and defensive stuff with them during the week. A mixture of all of that. But look, I played with Dennis for a long time. He's a great character. He's quiet. He's the kind of fellow when he speaks, people listen. And he's still relatively inexperienced. But it wouldn't, you know, it's no surprise that Munster are looking to try and get someone like him back. If it's, we don't know. I don't know. We're only hearing that speculation. I think, again, we were speculating a lot about Graham Rowntree and the head coach position. Mike Prendergast has been mentioned, and Dennis Leamy. They're the only 2 people I've heard outside of you know, in the public, if you like, in the last few weeks. But
do you think Prendergast?
I think it would be exciting.
Do you think Prendergast is likely?
I would say pretty likely. It depends. I think he's definitely someone that Munster are interested in, and vice versa. But, you know, I think Mike still is contracted in France, and so who knows where that's going to end up, you know what I mean? And if he's actually going to make that decision, I think for any person working in sport, and if you know, I would say that Munster interests him. Of course, he's been on the road for for 9 years now in France, and to go back to your hometown club, and probably similar with Dennis. Dennis is trying to progress his career in rugby coaching as well. He's in an incredible environment at the moment. Does he decide to stay with that and develop himself more? That's a real possibility, and it's the same for Mike. Does he stay on in France? I think he's very well respected there, but I think the management team that Graham Rowntree assembles, that's really important, because it's blatantly obvious that the players need to be upskilled more, and the attack game needs to be improved more. And I think putting the ingredients and the people involved that can do that. And I think having former Munster players come back in is the way to go now, if they're available and if they've got good coaching CVs, which certainly Mikey Prendergast has, and Dennis is less so because he's only in the game a couple of years, really.
Yeah, I definitely agree that like, allied to Rowntree's experience, it will bring that sense of identity back pretty quickly, and it will be very exciting. The one thing you'd have to say is that, like, as the injuries have cleared up and as the best players have been available for them, their attacking style seems to be evolving. We're not in the situation we were at the start of the season, where we weren't sure what Munster were trying to do. They do appear to be trying to keep the ball alive more often. They do appear to be trying to get their best players in space more often. They do appear to have some ideas, and like, it might be a massive oversimplification, but we've had a long period now, months, where we've had Joey Carberry fit, where Keith Earls is back in the team, where Damien Dielende is fit, where Chris Farrell is alongside him. They don't have strength and depth, and when those players are injured, it's not like Leinster, who can put out a team and say, okay, play exactly the same way because we've 40 players who are almost as good as each other. For Munster, when their best players are playing well, they're a really good team.
And I think that's the key for the next couple of weeks. And if you the season has been so stop-start, and when you don't have the same depth across the board with COVID, with the injuries, with all those disruptions that happened pre-Christmas, you get better when you play matches. That's very, very obvious, and I think they've improved in the last couple of weeks. I think it shows around some of their attack that there is the capabilities are there, and I think there's been a gradual change since Christmas, particularly since that Connacht game at Christmas, where that highlighted a very blunt approach in the sports ground. The lack of ambition to pass or attack. And that was there for everybody to see. I think it was 45 passes in the game, and Craig Casey had 24 or 5 of them himself. So I think they've had to change, and I think they've looked at it and tried to change. And we've seen glimpses of that. There's still problems and issues around power and physicality and the discipline in the last couple of weeks. That away Exeter game, set piece the other night was under pressure at times. And nearly cost them in the end. But I think, look, there's certainly been improvements. Had they enough power and strength to go on and get to a final of the URC or progress to the semi-final of Europe? There's still doubts there in my mind, but on their day, if they get things right, I think they're in a much better place now than they were 6 months ago.
Leinster were beaten by the Sharks 28-23. It was a Sharks team festooned with Springboks, and it was an unrecognisable Leinster team. And yet, at the end of the game, it was Leinster who were on the Sharks try line, trying to get a try that would have tied the game and maybe kick a conversion to win it. So I know that they're going to be disappointed that they didn't win the game, but it's quite the performance to be able to go against a team like that and give yourselves an opportunity to win it.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. I think they did so well in that game against an incredibly powerful side. And I think where they came unstuck and was probably line out maul and the scrum at times, and sometimes kind of just pure physicality in the contact areas. But they could have and possibly should have won that game at the end. They were attacking the Sharks line, and you could see the reaction of the Sharks players at the end. Loads of South African internationals playing in that team. Khaleesi, who's the South African captain, you didn't really see much of him in the game. I was surprised and shocked But incredible power from them. But let's be honest, this was a Leinster B side who nearly beat the Sharks in South Africa, possibly could have. So it just shows the depth and the strength they have there in the squad, and the amount of changes that Leo Cullen was able to make. Even some of the substitutions during the game. I think Andrew Porter was coming off at one stage, and I was like, Jesus, they're defending a 5-metre line out and you're taking off Andrew Porter. But I think Leo just has the confidence and has a real belief in his squad and in some of those younger players, the hunger and the desire to perform at that level. And they're in a very good place. I think they're 9 points ahead of the Stormers. They could probably afford to, pick up a couple of losing bonus points this week against the Stormers. And I know they'll want to beat Munster in the last game, but they're definitely going to be in the top two, even if they didn't win the last two games. So in a very, very strong position. And I think when you consider all the internationals they can bring back when they come back from South Africa, their focus will solely be on winning the European Cup and winning the URC, and I think they're certainly the team and the squad to beat.
Can we just move on to yesterday at Welford Road, Alan, in the Six Nations? Ireland hammered 69-0 by England. It was 10-0 at half-time. The extra fitness, the professionalism that kind of feeds into that fitness was just blatant to see in that second half. And we were having this conversation with you on Friday about the missing sevens players, and like you make the very valid point that in an ideal world, having depth to be able to have a good sevens programme and a good 15s programme is where every rugby country wants to be. When you look at that performance yesterday though, at what stage if we take into account the report and all the good work that might be being done behind the scenes, are these sort of results actually doing long-term damage, whereby any young person watching that game yesterday isn't necessarily being pushed to play rugby with the view for playing for Ireland because England are just so far ahead of them? And at what point do the IRFU actually need to start taking a very short-term view on this to try and arrest the growing gap between Ireland and the bigger teams? And I mean professional contracts. And I know they'll want a long-term plan, but at what point do they need to start, shipping some water now at this point and trying to close that gap now and for next year's Six Nations?
Yeah, I think that's something that's probably going to happen probably sooner rather than later, but we're not surprised, though, are we, by the results? I think, nobody's shocked here. Just England are the best team in the world. The conditioning, the tries they scored yesterday, the accuracy, the power, the complete mix that they can bring to their game is phenomenal. Regarding kind of putting younger girls off, I don't think that would be something that this would scare people to go and play for Ireland, because I believe that we're at a kind of a point now where I wouldn't say it's bottom of the barrel, but it can only get better. I think the development, the skills, the structures, the short-term solution probably is contracts and trying to contract players, because what we saw yesterday would indicate that fitness, power, strength and conditioning, all those kind of things came into play in the second half. And being a full-time athlete as opposed to amateur athletes, I know some of the girls play in England, but the English team, they can rest and recover this morning. They can do their ice baths. They can have their recovery day. The rest of the Irish girls are back to work or back to college or whatever they're doing.
So does that not suggest that England are the ones that are going to get better rather than Ireland? Like if you're saying that this is the bottom of the barrel, there's no guarantee that England don't open the gap further.
Yeah, they could. Of course they could. They've got better in the last number of years, got more powerful. And this isn't a quick solution, Eoin, that we contract 20 Irish girls and they're going to be in incredible shape for the next Six Nations. I think it's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take a couple of years. And what you want to see is improvements, skill improvements, strength improvements, rugby knowledge, more understanding, higher quality games in the AIL, more players coming through. And the report suggests all that it's going to happen. But I think some of the Irish players, I think maybe the short-term solution is to try and at least get part-time contracts or get those players contracted in the next period of time. But it's difficult to just, like I said, it's not something that we didn't expect before the weekend. We knew this was capable of happening. They've scored 42 tries in 4 games, the English players, and of course they could get better. But on the evidence of what you see from them now, there's very little room to improve anymore, because they're so dominant against every side they play against. And I think it's something now that has to, definitely be looked at and activate some of the points that came up in the report. But the danger, I think what's more important here, on the short-term solution is contract the players. But, you know, if you have a raft of those players then that get injured or missing or not playing well, you know, it's the players coming up. I think it has to go hand in hand with development. Okay. I think that's really important, and to try and increase the level of the competition and the level of games we see in the AAL week after week. Okay. Get more girls playing, but you know, I think it's something that certainly could be accelerated. All
right, we got to leave it there. Alan Quinlan, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers.
Looking forward to this week's episode of the Red 78 podcast, where there'll be more analysis and reaction to the Ulster game, and looking forward to what's coming down the tracks over the next few weeks. And no doubt speculation about what the makeup of the backroom team under Graham Roundtree is going to look like. It's 15 minutes past 9 this morning. Here's what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio today. If you want to listen to this, you just tell your smart speaker to play OTB Sports Radio. Declan Murphy is at 1 o'clock. Gary Halpin, retrospective. At 3 o'clock, Paul Flynn, career interview at 4. OTB Gold with Dr. Harry Edwards at 6. And then live tonight, the show from 7. Kevin Walsh is up next.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Literally, she had the whole final third of space.
You were a killer.
Keep up to date with the latest WSL action and the biggest interviews.
On our own shores, obviously, smaller crowds, but no less excitement in the WNL this week. I mean, they just seem to be a team full of winners. Being on top of the league doesn't faze them. That's where they expect to be. At this point, yeah, I think I'm tipping Chelsea.
Subscribe to the Koi Gig podcast stream on the OTB Sports app now.
FBD Insurance knows this sound spells trouble for van drivers. But if you're an existing FBD customer, you'll get 15% off a new van insurance policy. It's how we're keeping you and your van on the road. Visit fbd.ie or contact your local branch. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. Terms and conditions apply. 15% discount available on new commercial motor policies only when an existing FBD farm, business, car or home policy is in place. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Commercial motor insurance is underwritten by FBD Insurance PLC.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Mayo unveiled their new playing surface, but it ended up being a 1-point defeat for them in the Connacht Football Championship against Galway. I'm delighted to say Kevin Walsh is with us to give us some analysis of what happened. Kevin, a topsy-turvy game that almost ended in a draw at the end. What was your take on first off, let's start with Galway's performance. What did you make of it?
I suppose, look, it was, as you said, topsy-turvy. It was, you hear of a game of two halves, but it was like a game of 4 quarters where Galway obviously started off well, went maybe 6 points ahead, and Mayo closed the gap at half time. And again, Galway came out well again, and Mayo closed the gap towards the half and fell short. But I suppose, look, at Galway controlled the game, to be honest. They definitely were far more efficient with the chances they had. And I suppose, you know, the downfall at the end for Mayo was possibly their long free taker was non-existent, and they didn't seem to have one from the right-hand side, which, you know, would have cost a little bit as well. But in fairness to Galway, I suppose they did show that bit of bite, and it was very important that when Mayo came back at them before half time that they came out again, and they did in the first half and the second half. So, albeit there's a lot of learnings from it, the fact that they almost closed the gap in the end.
What do you think the learnings from Galway's perspective will be?
I think they're going to have to look at, I suppose, either way, whether you win or you lose, the two imposters are the same. So it's really important that they look at the analysis of it, because sometimes winning can cover over cracks, and losing can be too deep at times. So like if you look at the kickouts, for instance, I think Galway only won 9 of their own 19 that went long. And I think that's a low enough percentage where that'll have to be upped, where I think Mayo won 6 out of their 8 long ones. So that needs to be worked on. I think the fact I think they got something like 26 attacks in the game and got 22 shots off, which is good. That's really, really good shooting, getting shots off. But again, you have to wonder on the Mayo side how they let 22 out of 26 shots off, what the defence was like. I think we called it last week that when Mayo are unable to stop teams coming out like they were 3 or 4 years ago, they needed to have a plan B in the back, like with a sweeper or whatever you want to call it at different times to protect the back. And, when you get 22 shots off of 26 attacks, you'd have to wonder what Mayo's intensity in the back was like. I suppose the other thing is, that like Damien Comer was top class yesterday, and there's a few other forwards you'd like to get a bit more involved that might just take a bit of the mantle there.
Just talk to us a little bit about the Mayo defence then for a moment, will you? Because it certainly seems as if Galway had learned some of the lessons from the last couple of seasons where they had been fairly open at the back and they were funneling loads of bodies behind the ball who were being effective at stopping Mayo. Why were Mayo not able to do the same thing?
I suppose it's about practice, and I don't know if they've ever done that. And if you go back over the years, you had a half back line there of Durcan, Boyle and Keegan who were a continuous threat pushing teams backwards. But Mayo don't have those three there anymore. I know Keegan is there, but he's gone back in the back to fill up holes in the back where Keith Higgins is gone. So I'm not so sure how much Mayo have replaced their players yet. And don't forget as well, when you had McLaughlin going well up front and you're Keane O'Connor going well up front and you're Jason Darting and you're Andy Morden and those guys, they were really good at stopping the opposition coming out. Which means they probably eventually got bodies funneled back, but they had another 5 or 10 seconds to do that. And now, at the minute, they're struggling. And I'm just wondering with James Horton, has he ever had the plan B to get into that way? And he had different players than he had 5-6 years ago. You're going to have to adapt your game plan to the players that you have. And I'm not too sure the Mayo have got there yet.
Maybe it's a strength and depth issue as well. I mean, several key players injured, including the goalkeeper, and so their own kickouts were erratic. Oisin Mullen goes off after half time, and all of a sudden you are down the depth chart, and maybe they just didn't have enough bodies to be able to do what they were trying to do.
Maybe, but I think they were still struggling when Oisin Mullen was on there. I mean, if you look at the one of the first 2 points call we got, Damien Comer knocked the ball down to himself. He was going away from goal. He turned maybe after 10 yards, and the 2 Mayo guys were standing to look at him where he turned and just put the ball over uncontested. That wasn't happening when the Keith Higginses of this world were there, and Oisin Mullen was on the field at the time. So it's just, I'm not so sure. James Durcan was obviously lost. The goalkeeper would have been lost for long free kicks, which wasn't there for that. But I thought Burns' kickouts weren't that bad yesterday. So, but look, they're going to have to look at certainly having another style to go to when required.
What did we see from Galway yesterday in terms of a defensive system that we didn't see earlier this year?
Well, it was something I expected. I was down at, I think I called it on the podcast last week, where I was down at the Clare game in Tuam in the league, and there was 1-2 each at half time where Galway had 15 behind the ball the first 20 minutes. I mean, not behind the ball, behind the halfway line. So it was obviously something that they were going to go back to. And for me, looking in, I think it's good to see that forward thinking. That this I suppose the narrative of the Galway style back in the years gone by, like I would have been talking about this for a long, long time. It's not about style; it's about moving on, and it's about doing the best thing for the team. And at the end of the day, like we have seen the goal coach, it's about taking space and making space. You don't have the ball, you take the space that matters. And when you do have it, you make the space that matters, and you get your best players in the best position. So, like Galway were getting back well yesterday. They were behind in midfield a lot of the time, 1 or 2 left up front. And why wouldn't you do that? That's the way the game has gone. That's the most effective part of the game. And to win, you're going to have to learn to do that. And I suppose that's where Mayo haven't moved yet, and maybe they'll start moving there now. But Galway have been moving there now, which you could see during the league was happening. And it had happened once or twice last year as well, after maybe they decided to go full press. They got a few heavy beatings, so they learned from that. So it's just hopefully that the plan A, B and C will be there for, you've got to look at this different ways. Like, if you're with a strong wind, it has to be what it's now. You should be pushing up all day. If you're against a strong wind and they have a very strong partnership against midfield partnership against you, you've got to be able to protect and cover over the top. So there's loads of what if scenario, and teams have got to be coached for all that, and it all depends on the clientele you've got for players. So are Mayo strong as they were up front before with their tackling? I don't think they are, so they need to adapt.
It's interesting that you said that you saw signs of this defensive system last year at times from Galway. So, like, is it different from, say, the first season of Padraig Joyce? Is this something that just didn't exist, and now he's suddenly thought to himself, right, we need to have a bit more of a defensive system at times?
But look, I suppose you're going to learn that as you go along. But when you've shipped heavy scores, and even in the league this year there was heavy scores shipped as well, you're going to obviously have to look at that, and you know that's what management is about. There's backroom teams, and analysis there. There's a whole lot of there. So it's about getting your team the best you can be, and you know you're going to have to. And Roscommon is going to pose, or not Roscommon, but whoever comes through the rest, and Roscommon will now be favoured to come through the rest. They will pose big threats, and you know you could see last night, and you know that Galway were getting bodies back, the two sleepers back at times, and you know. I'm not so sure that Mayo were strong enough even to try and see could they move the Galway sweepers around, because the better teams will actually move them around, and they will see, I suppose, to make sure that they know exactly what they're doing.
It was a weirdly flat performance from Mayo, wasn't it? Under the circumstances, first time back in the new pitch and all that kind of stuff, and a home crowd. Even the crowd seemed flat.
Yeah, it was a funny kind of a game. Like I said, it was like 4 quarters type of thing, you know. I suppose the crowd started to get going towards the end when maybe they saw Mayo come back with a very late rally, and it's ironic that it had to be Lee Keegan that kicked it outside the boot to maybe put a kickstart in the Mayo side, and you know it's probably the last 5 or 6 minutes was the most time where the crowd got going.
So from Mayo's perspective, they have 5-6 weeks off now. It's the ridiculous scenario where they go off and have a whole pre-season and they get to taper up again, and they might have bodies back, and they'll certainly have more training in the legs of the players who were just getting in under the wire yesterday to start the game. So what should we expect from them for the rest of the season?
Yeah, look, to be fair, if you look at Kieran O'Connor, this is his first day yesterday as well, which is probably a big ask. As you said earlier on, James Durkin is missing, and he's a big loss as well, as is the keeper there, and Jordan Flynn midfield. So, you know, 3 or 4 bodies can make a huge difference. But I still think they're going to have to adapt over the next number of weeks to get something else a little bit in place, because no matter who comes in the forward, they're not yet up to the standard where Andy Morden would have been. You know, Keelan O'Connor when he was going his best. Kevin McLaughlin was a real tiger when he was going his best. So they're going to have to just look at other areas as well that to I suppose to make them a stronger unit, depending on what opposition they won't be against. And you know, the back door now doesn't give it 3 or 4 games where you might be getting less opposition. You're going to probably go into the line then straight away. So, but the only thing is they have a few weeks to get together, and there probably will be other teams looking for challenge matches. So it's they've a good bit of time to get things right.
From a Galway perspective, how important was it to get over the line? And like, so that there's a Mayo forward with the ball, the weight of the ball in his hands, and if that goes over, we're headed for extra time. Not a situation that they would have thought when they were, making the substitutions with a 5-6 point lead, the clock ticking into the red. I presume Galway thought they were going to see that game out. So they definitely, they're not there yet as one of those cynical teams who can kill a game off. But it's much easier to have that analysis in the aftermath of a game that you've won than it is after you've lost. Those conversations are like, geez, we got away with one there, but don't do it again. So,
no, you're right. I suppose it's great to be able to learn a lesson and there's no consequence. But again, I suppose it's something regardless. Like I said about the 2 imposters, the winning and losing, you can't just walk away from it either, because last year Monaghan got a late goal to relegate Galway. Roscommon got a late goal this year when they looked like Galway was the league final, and Mayo almost came back there again yesterday, and he did get a shot off to draw that game. So either way, so that's something that Galway have to look at. But as you said, it's good to get away with a cheap lesson. But again, like, look, there's still nervy moments, so it's very hard to sometimes subconsciously you're waiting for the whistle to go. And I suppose, like, Galway haven't won a kind of final since 2018 now again, so it really had to stop the rot again, and that was really, really vital to win that game yesterday. So you can see how delighted Pádraig and the manager team on the line yesterday. A lot of pressure was on there yesterday, and to get the result has taken a lot off. So I suppose, look at Mayo again were heading for other kind of finals, and it was a very, very important to stop that rot and give Galway a chance to get another kind of title this year after 2018.
And does that give the team confidence then, so that the next time they're in that scenario, they do something different as opposed to retreating again?
I mean, it does, because you have young players there that they just need to understand. And I suppose you have to go through this. It's fine telling people, but you have to experience it. I've always said about the 79-1. You should be preparing for 79 minutes, not 70. And if it goes into 77 minutes, you're still 2 minutes ahead of the time. So, I suppose you get it, through experience, but you should all be preparing for about 8 minutes overtime. You always should be, and not even look at the clock, because keep doing the same thing and be confident in what you're doing, and just finish it out, and not be retreating or not be worrying about it or not being hoping the whistle goes. It's out of your control, and I think it's important that people learn that, and that's a huge lesson from yesterday. Hopefully that the boys will pull something from that.
I just wanted to ask you about Paul Conroy, who's obviously, you would have managed him, and he's had some tough seasons, obviously, with the horror injury that he had a few years back. How happy are you, and I guess actually how surprised you that he's come back not only to the player that he was, but to almost hit a higher height than he's ever hit in a Galway jersey, it seems. Like, if you were handing out a Player of the Year award right now, he'd be right in the conversation. Yeah, look,
Paul works awful hard, always has. He's always worked hard in his body. He's always first at training. He's always consistently just trying to get better. So he's always been a good kicker. So, I suppose he's from in the right pockets. He's very, very confident in what he's doing at the minute. He was quiet enough first half of yesterday, but then he came out and kicked 2 points again after half time. So he's fallen into those pockets, and he is a lovely kicker. I suppose going forward, I just suppose it's something that Mayo looked like yesterday. It looked like they were a long way off the kickers. Look at Kenny McDaig, kicked a pint. Conley got 3. Johnny Heaney kicked 1 there, uncontested. Kieran Malloy kicked 1 unpressurised. It looks. I know I'm going to waste the goal points here, but it looks like the Mayo weren't putting as much pressure as they should be on the kicker. But to be fair to Paul, he's a leader, and he's always stepped up at big points. But over the last few games, he's got more than 1 or 2, which is great for him.
Kevin Walsh, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
No problem. Thanks.
Where are Galway in the power rankings now?
I don't know. They'll have to be right up there. Top 5, 6.
Where are Mayo?
Well, they were. Where were they? Were they third?
Third or fourth?
Yeah, they're going to take a bit of a drop.
They're tumbling, right?
Yeah, well, they tumbled after the league final, to be fair. They've already lost the second spot before yesterday, so you could say they were trending downwards.
So, who's second?
Tyrone
are second. Kerry, Tyrone.
Yeah.
And then
mystery team at number 3.
Probably still the Dubs. Well, if Con's back, is he? Does that get you?
Con back?
Don't know.
We'll
know in the next.
Know a lot more this weekend. Yeah, like by default, like they are the next team up. I think they were 4th, weren't they, in our last update? I can't remember. It's like 2 weeks ago.
If Galway can perform for the majority of the game against Kilkenny, they have a good chance of winning, says Devo. This is the hurling. Their last few championship matches have seen large spells where the other team dominates, which you can't do. Tender Chicken, how are you tender? Says Roy Keane, back to Cork. Manage the hurlers. Professional outfit with no heart. Ideal. The poor Cork hurlers, they just they take it and they take it and they take it and they take it. It's now reached a stage where I have sympathy for the Cork hurlers. A moment I thought would never happen in my life.
Well, like, I mean, how long will it take for them to start winning and for you to completely do a U-turn on that? Surely last year, I mean,
6 years at least. We're 6 years at least away.
They got.
Yeah, but it was the biggest humiliation. It's the type of thing that Cork used to do to other teams. My first All-Ireland final, they did that to Offaly in Thurles in '84, and it was like. That's what I expect from Cork, is to be absolute murderous when it comes to the opposition.
Yeah, like, I mean, they still had that great moment against Kilkenny in extra time last year in the All-Ireland semi-final. It's I guess it is the nature of the destructions against Limerick is obviously quite eyebrow raising, but they might not make it out of Munster, as we were discussing earlier, so that would be pretty bad.
Hibs would be a much better move than League One Sunderland, says Peter. I'm not sure, because with League One Sunderland you could get them promoted, you can win a trophy in that division the next season, and then you could maybe take them up from the championship. You can see progress, but maybe you get third and you end up in the Europa Conference League. And Dave says, death, taxes and Mayo shooting wides. Poor Mayo. It's not feeling too good for them at the moment. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good mornings. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. You can listen to OTB AM as a radio show on the OTB Sports app, or just ask your smart speaker to play OTB Sports Radio. And we're there all day for you, all day, every day. Tomorrow, we're looking ahead to Manchester City versus Real Madrid in the Champions League. That is going to be a good two-legged affair. Champions League semi-finals is some of the best sport that you can see in the world at the moment. They'll continue the fallout from that wild championship weekend and much more. Right now, we're bringing you Kieran Rahalik and Timmy McCarthy on the Sunday papers.
We do need to move on to Manchester United, because it does seem like the other big story when you look through the back pages. United's dressing room is a disaster, as I've just mentioned, is the headline on the Sunday Independent. What's really interesting, Kieran, is just the level of soap opera that even yesterday in isolation gave us. So people in this part of the world wouldn't have been watching Paul Scholes on DAZN, but he was working as a pundit for DAZN yesterday, and he says it is an absolute mess. I had a quick chat with Jesse the other day, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying that the dressing room is just a disaster. This was put to Ralph Rangnick afterwards, and he says, I think the whole group gets on reasonable with each other. I'm not daring to say they get on well with each other, but I don't say there being an issue with regard to the atmosphere in the dressing room. Then you had McTominay coming out yesterday saying there's a whole load of problems in terms of players, staff, everything higher up. It seems, Kieran, at this point that every single week is just giving extraordinary new public detail about how the players feel and how the management feel about what's going on at this football club.
Yeah, there's a real atmosphere of just accepting that things are going to go wrong, that there's no way out of it this year. They're very resigned to defeat. They're very resigned to negativity. So much, just even in that, Paul Scholes saying, I had a quick chat with Jesse, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying. I mean, that just baffles me a little bit. I'm not sure if Jesse really wouldn't mind Paul going out and recounting his private conversation to the TV. And then McTominay, as you said there, he says about we have a lot of problems in terms of players, staff, everything higher up. So he's thrown everybody under the bus. And then later on he says, for us, when you get back in the dressing room, it's go home and take a look at yourself in the mirror, which isn't the dressing room, but anyhow. For us, self-belief, lack of confidence, you can see it all in the last 2 months, which has been coming. We had a half-decent game today, but even then it is the belief. It's just not there at the minute. And then Rangnick comes out and says it's not realistic to dream and speak about the top four. So everything is just pointing downwards. It's all negative. It's all, giving themselves excuses that there's no way out of this. It just cannot get any better. So you'd wonder about Eric Den Haag waking up in Amsterdam this morning and seeing these headlines and hearing, ex-players speaking with current players, coaches speaking out the way they are. I mean, it's probably unlikely that they'll get to the top four, but I mean, has anybody looked at has Rangnick looked at the last few games? Nobody wants to finish in fourth place, it seems. Arsenal all over the place, United, Spurs drawing with Brentford. It's just unlikely to see, it's unusual to see a coach come out and not say, look, we'll leave it until it's mathematically impossible. We have 4 or 5 games. The other guys are slipping up. It can go anywhere. They're 6 points behind. But it's not impossible. But again, it's just the negativity, and they're all just resigned to that fact. And I think I was chatting to Timmy just a little bit before we come on. Timmy's a Chelsea fan, knows about the cycles that clubs go through. I'm a Celtic fan. I've seen ups and downs in the lifetime of being a supporter, and this Man United thing. I mean, it's all in the shadow of Ferguson, and it's almost like that entitlement that some of the fans and the followers see, and especially the players who played under Ferguson are really struggling to come to terms with seeing this club in the context they now exist. Roy Keane says this is Man United, and there's a lot of talk of this is Man United and this should be this and the player should be that, and that's not a Man United player. But what is that? Every club has to reallocate their beliefs when things change, and United have been in this a good few years now, and I think there's a kind of a funny ad sent around on Twitter yesterday. It was some betting company, and it's like a guy who's acting as a counsellor trying to treat guys who were Man United fans in the 90s and tried to get them to deal with this trauma and say, lads, look, we have to stop thinking about Blur and Oasis being number one at the top of the charts. There are different bands there now. And then saying, look, if you have a sign a player who doesn't do well and he's trying to force them to rewire their brains and say, well, actually, it's probably acceptable. We shouldn't be in the top four every season, And that's what a lot of Man United fans and ex-players need to do and deal with. And there's a lot of analysis through the papers about how that'll happen now going forward. There's a new impressive coach coming through. I think what Ten Hag did, like I think the Ajax performance in the Bernabeu in 2019 was one of the best I've seen, and like full of young players, full of homegrown talent. And if he gets support and the guys at the top in Man United get it together, which seems to be where the biggest problem is, then it'll be interesting to see. But there's no guarantee. Just like Timmy with Chelsea next season, God knows what's going to happen.
You'll have to get a season ticket, Timmy, if you want to get in the door at Stamford Bridge. The situation with the comparison you made with Ferguson and kind of the theme of Alex Ferguson, something that David Walsh explores on page 4 and 5 of the Sunday Times Sports section today. He starts by comparing it to Vince Lombardi and the Green Bay Packers, and he says, why should the Packers have gone through their dark age after Lombardi left, and the same thing happened at United after Ferguson called it today? Mostly because the dynasties were built on the vision and drive of one man. They led and the organisation followed. They left and the organisations they left were leaderless. And I do wonder if Manchester United are still married to that idea of the one person vision, that a manager can come in and impose his vision on a team and that will fix everything. That is why they've hopped from manager to manager to manager, and that might give you a little bit of concern that, you know, Ten Hag will be the silver bullet for all of Manchester United's problems, even though you've got someone as intelligent as Ralph Rangnick sitting there every week and saying, guys, this thing is a hell of a lot deeper than just a manager.
I was very surprised by some of the comments after yesterday's game, right? Obviously the Paul Scholes one, you know, and you take Kieran's point, you have a lot of former players who played in the United golden era of our lifetime, because obviously in the European Cup in '68 they would see it as a golden era, but the 20 years of the Premiership where they dominated the Premiership, you know, the players of that era are looking out at the current crop and saying, you know, they're not doing what we did, they don't have the passion, they don't have the pride, and that says, but for it to come out, like for McTominay to come out and for, you know, Jesse Lingard to be quoted, you know, internationally, you know, is really unusual in that sense. The biggest thing for me was Rangnick saying, we're not going to make the top 4. There are 4 games to go. There's 6 points behind, as Kieran said. But it's not mathematically impossible. I mean, you know, I've never heard a manager who are hanging about something saying, we're out of it. I mean, you know, even Kevin Keegan in that infamous TV outburst many years ago, you know, believed that, you know, they still had a chance, that United had to go to Leeds, I think it was, and get a result. And, you know, they didn't get it, obviously, at the time, that for Newcastle fans. So I'm really surprised at what's going on in United in the sense of within the dressing room. And, you know, it just seems to be toxic. And, you know, they're not playing for each other. I mean, you know, Paul McGrath on the world, I mean, basically talked about their performance against Liverpool and said, if you had Bruce Robson or Keane, you know, they kick somebody just to, you know, so they're not playing for each other. They don't look united as a group of people. On a good day, it's always easy. I mean, they have a huge amount of talent. They've spent a huge amount of money. So on a good day, United will always blossom because of the talent of the players. But you're not tested until you have tough days. And that, you know, we talked with Limerick earlier on about, you know, it got tough last night and they responded. When it's got tough for United at any point in time this season, when the real pressure came on, they have collapsed. I was saying I use for my clients, my business, under pressure, we do what comes naturally. And this United crop of people naturally fall under pressure. That's just the reality of what this current crop of people have become. And when that happens, they then look for scapegoats. And the comments that are coming out yesterday from McTominay, from Jesse Lingard, from Paul Scholes, who's not involved, from Rangnick, just highlights the fact that they're disjointed. They're not playing together. They're not playing to the best of their talent individually. The amount of stars getting injured. I mean, Pogba has spent most of the season and, you know, injured. The amount is always an indicator too of, you know, if you contrast, we would say, with City or Liverpool, who are at the top of the 3 at the moment, they have very few injuries in that sense. So I just think that it just is a toxic environment. And for Ten Hag coming in, you know, I mean, you made a point, Kieran, about his Barcelona victory that night in the Real Madrid victory, was it?
Yeah.
The Real Madrid victory. And but the cultural football in Ajax is very different than the cultural football in England. You know, just taking England first of all, okay? And then obviously, even though United, you know, fans might think that they have the same style of football as Ajax have, they don't. Ajax have a very different culture from underage, bringing out these young players right through to, you know, to seniors. So when you go from then the commentary said, Owen, about the toxicity went down right into the rest of the newspaper, which is all about Ten Hag. And, you know, one of his lines, he says, like, is that in a piece by Ian Herbert on the Mail on Sunday, I'll make egos fall into line. I mean, that's a really unusual statement to have to come out before you have the job, like, okay? Because everybody has egos. It's just how you have to manage them. But I'm not sure falling into line would be the ideal way for me if I was going to coach a new team, to say I'm going to make them fall into line. I might say we have to control our egos and manage our egos. So he's got a big task. And what I don't like for him is they're talking about giving him a long time. United fans want success. They want to recover. So, nobody's got a long time since Fergie has went. And, it's hard to see if United don't have the success, okay, in a medium period of time, that Ten Hag will suffer the same fate that the last 5 or 6 guys suffered.
And that is the constant contradiction that's always existed post-Ferguson. The constant stat that it's been 7 years between Alex Ferguson taking over the reins and actually getting his first trophy and getting things up and running at Manchester United. And because of the shadow that he's left at the club, in a positive sense, obviously, that other managers just simply will not get the time that he got. Kieran, there's been a couple of other interesting football nuggets, especially in the Sunday Times this morning.
Yeah, I presume you're talking about the Roy Keane one.
Yeah, Roy Keane and also Paul Rowan inside as well.
Oh, sorry, yeah, of course, yeah. So the Roy Keane one stood out to me partly because it's on the front page, and it's unusual to see Roy Keane on the front page without it being accompanied by some sort of a scathing quote that he's sent out. But I'm actually very excited about this one. Personal level, just because I'm a Celtic fan, to see somebody like him maybe coming up at Hibs. I mean, Sean Maloney was in there. He got 120 days. He promised, attractive, inventive football. He was a coach with Belgium, so he pity Sean Maloney, like former Celtic Aston Villa player. He left Belgium in January, February time with a World Cup on the horizon, and he goes there and he's dumped after 120 days. But Roy Keane is a potential successor. So Hibs, which could be interesting, tapping into the Irish history of the club there as well. He's had a couple of kind of false starts in terms of rumours of him being linked with Sunderland and other clubs, and I think he's wonderful on TV. He really is most of the time. Like it's just box office stuff, really. Even on Instagram, the stuff that you never thought you'd see Roy Keane doing, he's been excelling at it. But I'd love to see him back in the dugout somewhere, and it would be interesting if it was something like this. It's a bit of a curious one that you could imagine Roy Keane even becoming Hibs manager. I know the owner is very wealthy. They don't spend a lot of money, so it's a bit of a tough one in terms of that. The owner there is a guy called Ron Gordon, and he's a former tech billionaire. Actually worked with Atari, so you can kind of tell his age there. He might fit into the old school with Roy, but he does say we need a manager with some experience. That doesn't need to be somebody who's old with loads of experience, but we need a manager who can lead. And we are still looking to play an innovative, modern and attacking style of play. So I don't quite know if Roy will be the perfect fit there, but it's interesting to see his name back out there eventually. And I don't know, would we all prefer to see him back in the dugout or stay on TV? It's a tough one because he's been so entertaining. I know a lot of websites would like him to stay in the press box. And then inside on the Sunday Times, Paul Rowan, who seems to have a direct line to whoever takes the minutes at FAI meetings, has something that got back to 2018. Of an FAI board meeting, and this again shows a little bit more about Roy Keane and questions about how and why he would get a managerial role in the current era. So we know, most of us, I'd imagine, know the story of Stephen Ward, giving a WhatsApp voice message to a friend recounting an incident that happened in the Ireland camp between Roy Keane, Harry Arter and John Walters. They had a bit of a scrap. Ward described how Walters threatened to fight Roy Keane and had his peace offerings rebuffed, and Arter walked out of the treatment room at the team hotel after being subjected to a barrage of Keane's trademark invective. That's how Paul Rowan said it. So apparently then this came up at the 2018 FAI board meeting, and there was some fear that this may have led to Declan Rice leaving the Ireland setup, which looks now, and I mean, I'm looking through other pages here and they're all talking about where Declan Rice might end up this summer. Is it Man United? Is it Chelsea? Is it somewhere else? And, you have to look back and think, I thought he was nailed on. He played the 3 senior games. We have to look back and see if this is, or if there's any kind of question that this was part of the problem. It's one of the biggest mistakes in the FAI's recent history, because Declan Rice is obviously, imagine he was playing for Ireland now, be an absolute superstar for us. The minutes came out then, and John Delaney, who was then the chief executive, told the board that he had a meeting with O'Neill and Keane, and he had delivered the message to resolve the issues and get on with the game. And then when talking to the press, O'Neill should, quote, let them know who the manager is. So there was still a bit of controversy there, and Roy was thinking of going legal on Stephen Ward, which is an interesting tidbit, and Martin told him he's wasting his time. So eventually then in November, another meeting, Delaney said that the board had lost confidence in O'Neill, even though he's the third most successful manager Ireland ever had. And then, so the board spoke positively of Stephen Ward in all this, but it seems that may have been the straw that broke the camel's back with the FAI. And you'd wonder, with this coming out now again, will it harm Keane? Will other clubs potentially looking to see? Obviously, they have their own ways of finding out what goes on in the Ireland camp and whatever else. But it's another thing that just doesn't look well for Keane in the modern era. And you'd wonder if the Hibs owner has looked into this.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that was one of the moments that people will use as a stick to beat Roy Keane with, to suggest that maybe in the modern game his methods aren't suitable, I guess, to use that phrase. But I think, as you say, a lot of websites would be sad if Roy Keane leaves the Sky Sports studio. But then on the flip side, there is every single pre-match press conference at Roy Keane, every single post-match press conference at Roy Keane. I think regardless of where Roy Keane is, as long as he doesn't hide in a cave, he will be in the headlines in some shape or form, and he will always be a compelling story. And I think Hibs would be a fascinating one if he went up to Scotland there. We spent a lot of time on the footballer. That's the Sunday Times if you want to check that out. Paul Rowan with those new details there. We just want to quickly move on to the golf, and for anybody who read the Sunday Independent last week, they'll have read part 1 of Paul Kimmage's interview with Shane Lowry. Part 2 is published this week. It's on page 11, 12, 13 and 14. Offaly star revels in his status amongst golf's elite, but is not losing sight of his career goals. The life of Lowry is the headline on this Kimmage piece. And to me, it's a really interesting insight into his mindset in terms of the appreciation of where he has got to in his career, the sort of mentality he had on the final day in Portrush, even the sort of self-belief that he has getting that wild card into the Ryder Cup team last year. There's plenty of nuggets scattered around this piece.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the piece, I must say, and I thought it really delved into Shane Lowry's mindset at different points. Okay, so in the first page of it, they talk about him being in Pebble Beach and having before the Pebble Beach Pro-Am, he was in the Monterey Peninsula Country Club with Porter Harrington and their two caddies, and he sat down after the night and had a menu, sat in the chair, gazed over the links and said, "Jesus, lads, where did it all go wrong?" And I just thought that line actually summed up the appreciation that Shane Lowry has for where he has come from to where he actually has got to in that sense. Because it's probably unlikely that most other pros in any sport would say that. We can't say no other sport, but it's very unlikely. And particularly in golf, I thought. So I just thought to myself, here's a guy at that point had won, an Irish Open in Portrush, and still was humble enough to actually, not take for granted what has happened. So that really impressed me. The other thing that was fascinating was the Scotty Scheffler reference to Scheffler's admittance the night after round 3 of the Masters and the morning of the Masters. That in the morning and the night before he said he was fine, but on the morning he cried. He couldn't stop crying, and his wife basically said, "Look, you're not defined by golf. You're defined by the man you are." In that sense, right? Okay. No, sometimes that's easy to say because if he went out and lost the lead, there might have been a different view. But she was really, supporting him as best she could in the circumstances. And then Shane Lowry went on to talk about the Portrush situation for him. And he said that he couldn't sleep the night before. He said, I don't think I ate any food for the day. Bo, his caddy, kept saying to me, "You must eat, you're going to get sick. You have to do something." He said, "I can't, I'm going to get sick." For me, it was all about, what if I don't win? And I thought this was a fascinating part. His quote is saying, "What if I don't win?" It wasn't what if I do, it was what if I don't. I'm not sure how long it would take me to get over it if I hadn't won that day. And he talked about his coach coming in, Neil Manship, and I have no choice but to win today. So to me, reading that, it was fear was driving, the fear of losing, rather than the performance of performing in that sense. And when I'm coaching teams, I talk about, don't be afraid to lose or get preoccupied with winning. Just perform. And if my experience, if you perform to your best, you'll get the result if you're talented enough most of the time. I thought that was fascinating. That really jumped off the page, that he was afraid of not winning. And it was basically, that wasn't what drove him to perform in the day, because if we remember, the day was a very bad day and Tommy Fleetwood kind of gave him a bit of a gap early on. But I thought that was, you know, and then he said, what did he say to you? And he said, I can't remember what Neil Manship said. He says, and what about Wendley? So it just sort of highlighted that here's a guy who comes across as a very humble, decent, ordinary guy who is playing at the highest echelons in professional sport, is earning vast sums of money for his performances on the course and off the course, and yet is a decent guy. And that's what I loved about, you know, what it did on it. It encapsulated, you know, his mindset, you know, appreciating where he's come from Clara. It encapsulated, you know, the openness that he has as a sports person, and then his mindset in the biggest day of his professional career to date in trying to win the Claret Jug at Fort Rush. And he talks about his family and you know, he talks a lot about that and his children and stuff. So I loved it. I really loved it because I got the impression it's Shane Lowry. That was, to me, you know, this is Shane Lowry. That was the impression I got in reading this, you know, because sometimes you read pieces and you say, is it Shane Lowry or is it a bit of PR spin? I got the impression this was Sheahan.
It definitely felt that way, and it's just fascinating, that psychology of being a leader on the final day of a major, and just how it seems like a completely different world to even just being a couple of shots back. Because in part one, he talks about the morning of the Masters this year, watching Burnley against Crystal Palace, I think it was, going over to his dad's house, having a coffee. I could say it's a matter of a difference of a few shots, but I suspect that were he to be in the lead or in Scheffler's position this year, he would have also felt the same sort of nerves, the sense of being able to, within shooting distance of putting on that first ever green jacket. And just because he was the chaser rather than the leader, that psychology seems, anyway, from Scheffler's perspective and from Lowry's perspective, just worlds apart, which is really, really interesting. Kieran, what stuck out to you from this piece?
I just have a quick question for you lads, actually, because I didn't see the first part of this. Did he talk about how his mental state was going into the fourth round of the Masters? Because I think the first part of this last week talked about that. Did that come up?
There was definitely more chat about the Masters last week than there is this week. That's the whole element of it. And also the situation where he triple bogeys on, what was the hole 14, was it, on the final day of the Masters? Maybe it was a bit earlier than that. Just how that kind of was a complete pressure valve release for him. Yeah. He was like, well, that's it. That's the whole thing screwed up now at this point, and he could play a little bit freer.
Just relaxed.
Exactly, yeah. So that was probably one of the bigger insights we got into the final day of the Masters.
I'm just curious if it actually did change post Port Rush, but looking at that, yeah, that bit stood out to me as well as Timmy there. Paul did ask him, you know, at what stage did it end? At what stage during that final round were you home? And I remember watching it, and you know the way he came up to 17th, 18th with a big smile on his face, and it was as if he said he spoke to his caddy and said, God, let's just soak this up. This is what we've always dreamed of. And he looked like he really enjoyed it. There was no stress. He played the flop shot like it was just practicing out the back, like Paddy did many years before that. But in this interview, he says not until the very end did he think, you know, I'm home. Maybe it was the 18th fairway. And he said, I'm sure Scotty said the same. It's the best day of your life, but it's the most horrible as well. It's so unenjoyable. It's not even funny. But then when it's over, you look back and think that was amazing. And I think, you know, what Paul does really well here is he's obviously built up these relationships with the golfers, because, you know, golf is an interesting beat to be on. You get to travel around and spend a lot of time in and out of the marquees with the players. And it's kind of a smaller pocket of journalists that travel around the world and travel to the big tournaments, and you get to know the golfers. You might get a bit more access than you do in soccer or rugby these days. I've covered a few tournaments, the Ryder Cup, Irish Opens, and you know the players will always be brought into the big tent after their round. So it's nearly like you'll speak to them 4 or 5, 6 times a week. So this is why you get such great access, especially Paul having built up these relationships, and the chats that you get with Shane. I often found, even just talking to mates or other journalists, you know, talking about him being relatable sometimes feels a bit insulting almost, to say, you know, he's just an ordinary Offaly man, and he's every man, and, you know, we can relate to him, he's so ordinary. And, you know, sometimes people think that just because he has a bit of weight in him as well. It feels a bit insulting sometimes, but reading through this, it does seem that he is. It just kind of reinforces it almost. It makes me feel that my initial thoughts on who Shane Lowry might be weren't all that far off, and he just does come across as a lad who, like you or me, who maybe dreamt of becoming a professional athlete or sports player, what we'd do if we got to that stage, and he seems to do it. You know, he talks about moving to Jupiter. I had a friend who lived in Jupiter over in Florida in the late 90s, and there were some golfers living nearby, and I thought, God, imagine being a golfer and this is where you go and you all hang out in the same area in a gated community. And he's talking about living there now, and the kid Ivy has a little American twang, and he talks about having, you know, the pool out the back and pinching himself and going, geez, how did I end up here? You know, that's just his house. But he's living the life, and he's living in that community, and he goes down to the Bears course in Florida there near West Palm Beach, and he'd see Jack Nicklaus or Gary Player, and then Dustin Johnson turns up. So he's living that life, and it does seem like it's so alien to him in a way because he's so down to earth. But there's another little snippet there about what about your place in history? You know, he was talking about the stature, how stature changed after winning the Open. And Paul says, what about your name on the claret jug? And he goes, yeah, that's pretty cool, to be fair. And to have the actual claret jug in your house, I used to keep it on the island in the kitchen. And Paul says, like Padraig. And he goes, yeah, it nearly hits you in the face when you walk into his house. After a few months, the sense of, oh my God, wears off. But the coolest thing is the look on people's faces that see it for the first time. I've showed it to people that have cried. So he really gives a great relaxed insight into so much here. And there's that little bit about talking about playing with Tiger Woods. You know, he eventually played with Tiger Woods, and it wasn't until 2020 that he did. And of course, Tiger's, you know, so old now. It's a bit like, you know, Anthony Elanga playing with Ronaldo or something in soccer. But he talks with just joy, childish joy about playing with Tiger and what he learned there. And how we learned from Tiger slipping up in the last round in the Masters. And it's a little unfortunate we didn't have that Disney finish, you know, with Sheahan coming back to do it at the Masters. But it doesn't look like he's going to be too far away in the future. And it reads very confidently. He seems to be a man comfortable within himself, happy with where things are going, and even hungrier to progress. So it's a great read, and it's a great insight from a player who seems very relaxed within himself and happy to talk.
Very confident. So and I think that, as you say, because of the very kind of affable personality that he is, maybe that's doing him complete injustice. Maybe that's not how you describe him at all, but certainly a very friendly character.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.